LoveLore Library. Chapter 337. Then she looked around. Was there a fire or an earthquake, so she needed to escape? No, even if she needed to escape. Yi Yuxuan was also leisurely. I really didn't sleep enough. Even hallucinations appeared. Wei Bai turned a corner and found that Yi Yuxuan didn't chase after her. She immediately covered her chest and leaned against the corridor wall, unable to walk. Her heart was overloaded. She gasped for breath. Damn it, she was going to have a heart attack. Energy feedback mechanism turned off. Deducting 7 days of life. Remaining 10 days of life. Hope the host can cherish it. Wei Bai was very angry. If you want me to cherish it, then don't rob me of my life. The system was alarmed. Yi Yuxuan is catching up again. Wei Bai was frightened. She turned around and saw Yi Yuxuan's spirit appear again. Ding, energy feedback restarted. 9 days. 8 days, Wei Bai held her head in despair. Yi Yuxuan, don't come over. I have an infectious disease. System, Yi Yuxuan. The scene was awkward for a few seconds. Yi Yuxuan stood in the same place. He stared at her. A pair of calm black eyes were tinged with a trace of vitality. It was like water, but also like hope. Call me again. His eardrums were still trembling slightly. Her voice was so familiar that it made his heart beat faster. Wei Bai retreated and said, Okay, I'll call you. Yi Yuxuan, get away. Don't come over. Once you enter the 10-meter range, her life will disappear. Yi Yuxuan didn't leave. Instead, he approached her step by step. His voice revealed a trace of desire. Are you dreaming? Wei Bai retreated and was confused. Who doesn't dream? Everyone dreams when they sleep, scientists say. Yi Yuxuan couldn't help but reach out to grab her. Your dream, is it the same as me? Before she could finish her sentence, Wei Bai suddenly collapsed. She clutched her heart. She was having a heart attack. The familiar dull pain, the suffocation of being on the verge of death, caused her to tremble in pain. This damn disease. Yi Yuxuan quickly rushed over and hugged her. The softness in his hand stunned him for a few seconds. The feeling was still so similar to the one in his dream. Wei Bai reached out and grabbed his clothes, looking at him ferociously. The familiar voice kept ringing out. Feedback activated. 8 days, 5 days, 0. The system forcibly bestows a newbie gift package. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 3 days of vegetative state life. You will not be affected by reverse nurturing. Bai Changyan had just walked into the corridor with the soup when he saw his daughter fall into the arms of his future son-in-law. His daughter looked at him with hatred, as if she was looking at a murderer. Suddenly, Wei Bai saw Bai Changyan and used the last of her strength to shout, Dad, I want to break off the engagement. After that, her head tilted and she fell into the familiar darkness. Qin Qiu, who was passing by, happened to hear this sentence. He looked up and saw Yi Yuxuan holding Wei Bai. One fainted with a pale face. The other looked sad and desperate. There was also an old father carrying soup, sluggish at the scene. Qin Qiu, wait, what's going on with this murder scene? Did he miss out on some gossip that was worth hundreds of millions? The soup in Bai Changyan's hand suddenly fell to the ground. He trembled and said, Yi Yuxuan, what did you do to my daughter? If something happens to my daughter, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Yi Yuxuan looked down at Wei Bai, his eyes unable to move. After a long silence, Yi Yuxuan's cold voice finally came. I'm the one, I won't let her go even if I become a ghost, Titho. Chapter 338. Headache, heartache, soul pain. She looked at the ceiling hopelessly. The system waved a little flag of encouragement. Host, hang in there, you still have a lot of time. Wei Wei Bai was dejected. No, I'll just die. What's the point of working so hard on the strategy? I might as well work as a laborer and earn a few $100s a day. So many planes, but not even a day's worth of life points. She even let her own system fall to the point of eating snacks on credit. She was the biggest failure in history, second to none. The system said, work hard to accumulate a few more plane strategies, then I can apply for a mission upgrade project for you. Wei Wei Bai laughed, hee hee. The system said, how about next time you wake up, just hide and don't come into contact with Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai was indifferent and continued to be a salted fish. The system racked its brains. After the mission upgrade, the reward will also be upgraded. You have 6 months of life points. Wei Wei Bai repeated blankly, 6 months. The system nodded, yes. Wei Wei Bai sat up abruptly. Then why am I still sleeping? Get up and do it. The system let out a sigh of relief. Wei Wei Bai then noticed her situation. The hotel's presidential suite, the double rolling bed. She was lying on the bed, naked, and in the frosted glass bathroom, there was a well-built man, his back facing her as he took a shower. Bai Weiwei silently stared at the blurred glass, as well as the swaying buttocks inside the glass. So this was her strategy target. The mission target is to obtain So Xian's love. Mission target, So Xian. Time, 4 months. The memory was also transmitted. Wei Wei Bai's face paled. She reached out to hold her forehead, resisting the discomfort. According to the memory, the man who swayed his butt. His name was Chen Wenfeng, So Xian's archenemy. And her current identity was So Xian's wife. Was she having an affair? Just as she was thinking about this, the bathroom door was pushed open and the man walked out with a towel wrapped around his lower body. His face was handsome, and his eyes were filled with restlessness. He was at least 1.85 meters tall, and his muscles were well-defined and beautiful. One look and one could tell that she was an experienced cuckold. You actually woke up, Chen Wenfeng said with a smile. Wei Wei Bai had not fully digested the memories, and her expression was a little sluggish. Chen Wenfeng didn't care. After all, Wei Wei Bai was famous for being boring. She was known as an old virgin in the circle. She was already married, but she was still a virgin. What a joke. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to kick her out of the Su family, he wouldn't have cheated on her. Chen Wenfeng walked to the bed and untied the towel. It's good that you're awake. Let's do it. He thought that if he said that, Wei Wei Bai would lower her head in fear and shame. She was an old virgin who had never seen a man in her life. In the end, Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and slowly sized up his lower body. Suddenly, the corners of her mouth twitched and she couldn't help but sneer. Chen Wenfeng, was he being mocked? His masculinity was being mocked by a virgin. Chen Wenfeng rushed to the bed and directly held her with both hands. He sneered. So Xian will be here soon. You better make it sound good, otherwise I'll kill you. Wei Wei Bai finally digested the memories. Her world was called Wei Wei Bai. She was a conservative and boring woman. She married So Xian because of his grandfather's orders. So Xian was so fed up with her that he slammed the door and left on their wedding night, making her a big joke. She was a virgin for 3 years after she married him. So Xian couldn't wait to divorce her, but because of his grandfather's face, he didn't dare to mention it. And Chen Wenfeng's sister had been coveting the position of So Xian's wife for a long time. She instigated her brother to drug Wei Wei Bai and then caused the fact that he cheated on her, so that So Xian had a reason to divorce her. And when she arrived, the original owner was drugged and thrown on the bed. By Wei Wei's side, it was another original owner who was so stupid. She was just about to kick Chen Wenfeng away when the door suddenly opened. A handsome man walked in. His footsteps were casual as his eyes swept over them. It seems that I've disturbed you. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -30. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. To make it easier for you to read next time, you can click the button at the bottom to record the reading record. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 339. Yi Yuxuan. Yuxuan. Xian. Little baby. Big cutie. Fuck, do you want me to give you a needle? Why can't you wake up? Yi Yuxuan only felt that his eyelids were unusually heavy. He heard Qin Qiu's voice, chattering, and there was a strange irritation in his heart. Irritable, Yi Yuxuan finally opened his eyes. He quickly looked at the bed. The woman on the bed was lying quietly. Her eyebrows and eyes were calm, and there was no quickness when she opened her eyes. But she was quiet and unusually soft. Qin Qiu glanced at his hand. What are you doing with your hand on Wei Weibai's stomach? Yi Yuxuan pondered for a while, and then said flatly, I always feel that I have a child with her, in the belly. Qin Qiu. The air was quiet for about a minute. Qin Qiu suddenly pushed Yi Yuxuan away and pointed at his nose angrily. Yi Yuxuan, you beast, how can you take advantage of people when they are in danger? You can even lay your hands on a person in a vegetative state and even kill him. God, is this world devoid of morality, or is it devoid of humanity? Yi Yuxuan was silent for a few seconds before he understood what he meant. He opened his mouth to make it clear. Qin Qiu had already reached out to carry Wei Weibai. No, I can't handle the pregnancy. I'll take the pregnant woman to the gynecologist first. Yi Yuxuan reached out, gently grabbed the back collar of his white coat, and pulled hard. Qin Qiu couldn't control his whole body and staggered back, directly hitting the wall. Then Yi Yuxuan reached out and covered Wei Weibai with the quilt again. His eyes flashed with a lot of emotions, entangled into a feeling that even he couldn't understand. Yi Yuxuan had read a lot of books during this time, all about emotional analysis. His emotions would only be stirred up by one person. Facing Qin Qiu was good. Facing anyone was the same. He still had no feelings. But as long as he was by Wei Weibai's side, he was sure that he was the woman in his dreams. The emotions hidden in his body that had long since died. They were all revived and awakened. It was like a ferocious beast that had been lurking for more than 20 years. He finally opened his eyes. Qin Qiu covered his head that was hit. If you're pregnant, you need to see a doctor. Why did you push me? Yi Yuxuan said calmly, it's flowing again. Qin Qiu, he had to slow down. Because of Wei Weibai's drowsiness, he had the habit of checking her body every day. She wasn't pregnant yesterday. She was pregnant and had a miscarriage today. Yi Yuxuan added, in a dream. Qin Qiu, fuck, can you not speak with such a big breath? Did I give you an orgasm in my dream? Qin Qiu felt that he was going to have a nervous breakdown. So in the dream, you married Wei Weibai, got pregnant and had a miscarriage. Don't tell me you'll still die a horrible death in the end. Yi Yuxuan was silent, and silent again. Qin Qiu, what's with this dark atmosphere? It's cold. Finally, Yi Yuxuan said, he's crazy. The abandoned ex-wife of the Red's second-generation follow-up So Xian didn't come to Wei Wei Bai's funeral. Chen Wenfeng took care of everything. He wore a black trench coat, lost a lot of weight, and the outline of his face was fierce and cold. The funeral went smoothly. Some people felt pity, some were sad. Some were perfunctory, some were calm. Chen Wenfeng stayed at the funeral until the end. In the end, even the sad old Master Su left. He was the only one standing in front of the tombstone. On the tombstone, her portrait was the gloomy appearance before she changed. He later realized that Wei Wei Bai, who suddenly changed her temperament, didn't leave any photos for them. /collect. Chapter 340. It was as if she came and left. It was so easy and left no trace. My sister, Chen Wenfeng finally said, my sister has been paranoid since she was a child, so after she fell in love with So Xian, she went crazy. She was really crazy. She would do anything for love. When she heard that So Xian fell in love with Wei Wei Bai, not only did she collude with Su Tang to sell their information, but in the end, she failed and directly took the gun from the United States. She guarded So Xian's door just to kill Wei Wei Bai. I didn't let her get bail because of mental illness. Instead, I let her go to prison to repent for the rest of her life. For Shenxia, death was not terrible. The most terrible thing was to be in prison for the rest of her life. Whether it is me or So Xian, we are all scum who hurt you. You could have lived a happy life. Speaking of this, Chen Wenfeng suddenly felt a little sour. He looked up at the sky and said with a choked voice, if only you had never met us. If she had not met them, Wei Wei Bai would not have fallen in love with So Xian. If she had not met them, Wei Wei Bai would not have been able to pull herself together, only to lose her life because of his sister's madness. They were all murderers. No one was an exception. Chen Wenfeng never knew that he could love someone so deeply. And when she died, he really realized that after losing her, other than being full of regret, everything else had lost its meaning. Without her, he was just a walking corpse for the rest of his life. The next morning, Chen Wenfeng left with dew all over his body. So Xian still did not appear. Chen Wenfeng also knew how much courage it took to face this funeral. So Xian obviously did not have this courage. But 1 day passed. 2 days. 1 week. 1 month, So Xian still did not appear. Chen Wenfeng finally felt that something was wrong. He knocked on So Xian's door. It was the nanny who opened the door. So Xian. Chen Wenfeng was really angry. It was already too much for him not to show up on the day of the funeral. A month had passed, and he hadn't even gone to the cemetery to take a look. When people leave, the tea cools down. Su Xian was getting cold too fast. The nanny was a little scared and didn't know what to say, so she could only turn around and let Chen Wenfeng in. Chen Wenfeng stormed in with a gloomy face. The air was filled with a sweet smell. Chen Wenfeng suddenly stopped in his tracks. There were a lot of candied haws in the house. They were all inserted into the straw targets, decorating the entire room with a terrifying red fire. Then he saw So Xian sitting on the sofa. His face was very pale, very unnaturally pale. His body was surprisingly thin. So Xian's sharp spiritual aura had disappeared in less than half a month. There was only fatigue, haggardness, and a strange smile on his face. He said softly to the air, Wei Wei, I bought some candied haws today. You can eat 2 more. Chen Wenfeng stood in place. Suddenly, his anger turned into sorrow. So Xian acted as if he couldn't see Chen Wenfeng. He picked up a piece of candied haws and handed it to the empty space. But you can only eat 2, otherwise you won't be able to eat. It's not good for your health. Chen Wenfeng glanced at the empty space. Suddenly, tears welled up. Chen Wenfeng clenched his teeth and said, "So Xian, wake up." So Xian treated Chen Wenfeng as heir. In his eyes, Wei Wei Bai was smiling sweetly and saying to him, "So Xian, you bought so many candied haws, but I can only eat 2, aren't you too stingy?" /download. Chapter 341. So Xian smiled gently, "I'm afraid you'll be too full. If you really want to eat, I'll help you eat it. You can kiss me and it'll be the same as eating it. How can you be so shameless? As long as I want you, my face is not important." Wei Wei Bai suddenly leaned forward and bit the candied haws. After eating one, she said, "I'll eat it myself. I don't need you to feed me." So Xian also bit the candied haws and ate them one by one, smiling happily. "It's delicious, Wei Wei." Shen Wenfeng felt that he should calm down. So Xian kept talking to himself. He even answered his own question. He heard So Xian say again, "Let's go to Europe and have another wedding, okay?" After a pause, So Xian's voice was soft and sharp. His tone was imitating Wei Wei Bai's rhythm. "Europe is too far away. Let's have the wedding in front of our house." So Xian recovered his voice, "As long as you like it." Shen Wenfeng walked in front of him and squatted down to look into So Xian's eyes. He said word by word, "So Xian, wake up." So Xian's eyes were not focused. After he finished eating the candied haws in his hand, he reached for another one. Shen Wenfeng suddenly couldn't bear it anymore. He reached out and took the candied haws in his hand and threw them away. Then he grabbed Su Xian's collar and shook him fiercely. "Su Xian, you motherfucker, wake up. You coward who doesn't dare to face the reality. She is dead. She is not here." In the end, Shen Wenfeng was crying. After Wei Wei Bai's death, he was in a state of collapse. But there were too many things to deal with. He could only force himself to deal with everything. But today, seeing So Xian like this, Shen Wenfeng found that he couldn't hold on anymore. So Xian was confused for a while before he recognized the person in front of him. "Rotten Shen, didn't you say you wouldn't pester Wei Wei anymore? Why did you come to my house?" Shen Wenfeng said, "I came to your house to beat you up." After that, he clenched his fist and punched him in the face. So Xian was punched by him until blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Shen Wenfeng punched him again. He staggered several steps and almost couldn't stand still. His fist wasn't enough, he even used his foot. Su Xian was finally enraged. He suddenly went crazy and fought with Chen Wenfeng. The two of them were like wounded lone wolves, fighting and beating each other. It's as if they won't stop until they kill each other. Chen Wenfeng's face was covered with blood. He cursed sarcastically, "Where is Wei Wei? Where is she? Are you addicted to act? She's dead, so, you trash. A piece of trash." Su Xian didn't want to listen. He subconsciously rejected these words. Where is Wei Wei? Of course she's at home, by his side. He frantically attacked Shen Wenfeng. The things in the house were smashed beyond recognition. Shen Wenfeng pushed the candied haws to the ground and trampled them. So Xian was suddenly shocked. He quickly went to save the candied haws. "Wei Wei likes to eat, don't break them." Shen Wenfeng suddenly couldn't step on them. He lost all his strength and stood there blankly. So Xian quickly went to pick up the candied haws. 1, 2, 3. Tears suddenly dripped down. He lowered his head and tears crazily poured out. Shen Wenfeng also turned his head away. His face was full of tears. The two big men faced the messy house and the broken candied haws and cried their hearts out. Shen Wenfeng's arrival woke So Xian up. He whispered, Wei Wei is dead. Shen Wenfang said, yes. So Xian got up with a pale face and then went to take a shower and change clothes. Shen Wenfang saw him reappear. He was wearing a black suit with a pink corsage. Su Xian collected the intact candied haws and carefully wrapped them with wrapping paper, turning them into a large number of candied haws flower shapes. Let's go, I'm going to see her. / T. Chapter 342. Chen Wenfang looked at his clothes, his heart filled with bitterness. Wei Wei Bai was wearing a wedding dress before she died. At that time, she had already forgiven So Xian and even wanted to start over with him. So Xian wearing this today was also an answer to Wei Wei Bai. She wanted to start over. He also wanted to. They came to the cemetery. So Xian said, I'll stay with Wei Wei for a while, you go away. Chen Wenfang coldly snorted and finally walked further away. So Xian put the candied haws in his hand in front of her grave. He didn't speak, just stood there and looked at the tombstone. After a long time, he suddenly laughed, Wei Wei, me too. I suddenly feel that the person I should marry in this life is you. Chen Wenfang has been standing not far away, and he didn't listen to what So Xian was saying. There was a heavy premonition in his heart. He took out a cigarette, lit one with trembling fingers, and was just about to smoke. Bang! A gunshot sounded behind him. Chen Wenfang's fingers stiffened, and he suddenly didn't dare to look back. He took a puff and couldn't stop, one puff after another. When he finished smoking, Chen Wenfang knew that he couldn't escape from reality. He looked back and saw So Xian fell in front of Wei Wei Bai's grave. The tombstone was filled with the blood that gushed out of his skull after he committed suicide by shooting himself. Chen Wenfang felt that this picture was a nightmare that he couldn't get rid of. He stood there for a long time, his eyes blank and desperate. Finally, he took a deep breath and laughed at himself. You two left so casually, leaving me to live and bear the responsibility, not thinking about how I should live in the future. This is really, really a bastard. Qin Qiu deeply touched his face. He always felt that the cannon fodder in the dream was very miserable. Of course, this is not the point is. You're so thirsty that you want to dream of having sex with a girl, having children, and getting married. What kind of dreams have you had recently? None of them were normal. Yi Yuxuan frowned. I always feel like there's no real feeling when we make love. Although the man in the dream was very happy. But he didn't feel anything. It was as if they weren't in bed. Qin Qiu. Do you need to feel real when you have a dream? He might as well masturbate himself. Furthermore, he clearly couldn't remember the face of the woman in his dreams, but he would replace Wei Wei Bai with her every day. Who would believe that he did not have a crush on Wei Wei Bai? Wei Wei Bai was half awake. He seemed to hear someone talking beside him. The system's voice sounded tired. That jinx of yours is by your side. Listen to me first before you wake up. Otherwise, that little bit of life points will be sucked away again. Wei Wei Bai immediately grasped the main point. How little is my HP? The system remained silent for a while. You have to stay calm. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. I'm very calm. The system said, reward 30 days of life points. Deduct 10 days of continuation pills, 3 days of painkillers, 5 days of system repair, 10 days of discount for poor people, 10 days of expired discount. If you don't die from eating, consider me a poor loser. You have 2 days of life points left. Wei Wei Bai. What the hell is a spicy loser? Does the poor have to die? You discriminated against the poor because your ancestors didn't farm for 3 generations. No, the point was 2 days. Bai Weiwei's face was expressionless. I won't wake up. I won't wake up. Don't wake me up. What could he do in 2 days? It was not enough for Yi Yuxuan to take 2 breaths. The system said, I have a way to increase your HP when you wake up, but it's very risky. Weiwei Bai, ? The system said, Yi Yuxuan's HP is enough to save the entire Earth. His aura is strong enough to scare the entire universe. Weiwei Bai said, so. The system said, so, open your eyes and steal his HP. Weiwei Bai was shocked. There was such a thing, how do I do that? The system roared, push him against the wall and kiss him, /download the at https://m, Sashu. Save button below to record this chapter. Chapter 343. Cabin him. Kiss him. Weiwei Bai expressed that this method of robbery was very flirtatious. She needed to eat a spicy stick to calm herself down. This won't do. Last time, this bastard forcefully kissed me, causing my HP to be snatched away. If I kiss him, won't I be giving him my life points for free? Weiwei Bai expressed that she did not have amnesia. The system said earnestly, that's because you haven't used my method yet. Not only kiss him, but force yourself on him, confess to him, flirt with him crazily, you can do whatever you want. In any case, you must make Yi Yuxuan's emotions fluctuate. Weiwei Bai expressed, I don't understand. The system said, to put it bluntly, Yi Yuxuan is a treasure trove. If you want to take his life points, you need to get his permission. Seeing that Weiwei Bai was still thinking, the system continued to explain, it's not that he says yes, it's his subconscious that agrees. For example, if you can kiss him until he is as happy as being electrocuted, he will open up his life points, and I can take some for you. Weiwei Bai said. What if I kiss him and he's indifferent? The system said, your life points will be sucked away by him. Even if you manage to trigger his emotions and steal some of his life points, when he calms down, your life points will still be sucked away by him. Weiwei Bai, damn, that's why this stupid method doesn't work at all. Who can keep a man excited? Even a dozen Viagra won't be able to do it. The system said, that's why I'll let you receive the newbie gift pack and sleep for 3 days after you steal enough life points to preserve the life points you steal. This method, Weiwei Bai began to think about the pros and cons. The system said, this is already the best method. Once you've accumulated enough life points, you can sleep to complete the mission. After a few repetitions, you'll have a lot of life points and won't have to worry about dying at any time. Weiwei Bai finally nodded. That's fine. Wait until I get 100 years worth of HP. I'll kick Yi Yuxuan far away. When that happens, I'll be able to survive. System, burning the bridge after crossing the river, by Weiwei, as long as his mood fluctuates and he's happy. The system said, not only that, you can make him cry and suffer the same effect. But now that you've caused Yi Yuxuan pain, after you fall asleep, you can't control whether or not he'll fill your body with cement and sink it into the sea. So, let's just let him be happy. The effect will be the same anyway. Weiwei Bai was just about to nod when she realized that she had regained consciousness. She heard Qin Qiu's voice. Ha! Weiwei Bai's fingers are moving. Is she waking up? Yi Yuxuan, Bai Weiwei heard the familiar sound of a system prompt from him, and ding, detected the original owner, Yi Yuxuan. Energy feedback activated, forcibly giving out bonus lifespan. Weiwei Bai was so shocked that she immediately opened her eyes and sat up. She looked up and saw Yi Yuxuan standing by the bed. The handsome and cold man stared at her with a pair of calm eyes, deep and bottomless. When he saw that she had woken up, there was a ripple in those calm and deep eyes. Wei Wei Bai had been sick for a long time and was pale, but it did not diminish the light in her eyes. Her eyes were filled with a high desire to attack. 2 days. One day, there was no hesitation, no time to think. Wei Wei Bai's mind was only filled with Yi Yuxuan's lips and how to make a man happy. It was too late to joke. She could only forcefully push him against the wall and seduce him. Wei Wei Bai suddenly got off the bed and overestimated her own body. Her legs went soft and she fell into Yi Yuxuan's arms. Slash. Chapter 344. Bai Changyan, tired. There was a lot of information in this sentence. Wasn't his daughter sleeping? How could she be tired? Was she tired because Yi Yuxuan just did that to her? Yi Yuxuan was too lazy to pay attention to others. His fingers gently pushed aside the hair on her face. Then, as if nothing had happened, as if he had learned a new skill, he bowed his head and kissed her lips. This kind of action was natural. He couldn't help but kiss her again and again. Qin Qiu's whole person was not good. He rushed over and hugged Bai Changyan, who was about to beat Yi Yuxuan to death. He desperately explained, "Nothing, he didn't do anything. Uncle, listen to me, it was your daughter who moved first, really." Bai Changyan roared and pounded Qin Qiu's back hard. "Cancel the engagement, cancel. Let go of me, you colluding wolf cub." Qin Qiu burst into tears. Other people loved him while he was beaten. Why was it so difficult for single people in this world to live? Also, damn Yi Yuxuan, don't kiss anymore. He was going to be beaten to death. Help. Successfully entered the plane. The goal of this mission is to get the love of Ning Yishu. Target mission, Ning Yishu. Completion rate, 0, time, 16 months. Wei Wei Bai just heard the reminder. She smelled blood. She looked up and was surprised. In front of her on the wooden shelf, there was a badly mutilated man hanging. His body was slender, but you could see the youthfulness of a teenager. It was impossible to tell what his face originally looked like. He was beaten black and blue. Wei Wei Bai, according to the system's nature, this man who was beaten half to death couldn't be Ning Yishu. Suddenly, that man looked up. His eyes were very deep, flashing with the brilliance of stars. Even if he was beaten to this point, it didn't damage the spirit in his eyes. It was simply the bearing of a protagonist. Ding, the male lead's favorability is 3. Her favorable impression of him was 3. It wasn't -3, it was 3. Wei Wei Bai only felt that she had saved the Milky Way galaxy. She actually transmigrated to a world where the male lead's favorability was not negative. She felt that she had to slow down, lest she die of happiness. This was the first time in history. Then she lowered her head and looked at the whip in her hand. It was obvious that the original owner was tormenting the target. Even after being tortured to such an extent, he still had 3 favorable impression points. This was simply true love. Before Wei Wei Bai could look at the memory sent by the system, this badly mutilated man suddenly opened his thin lips. "Master, this disciple knows his wrongs." "Master," Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but tremble. As soon as she arrived, she encountered the original owner. If this continued, Ning Yishu's favorability would go negative. She had to quickly put him down. Since his favorability was at 3, she could use her love to influence him and make his favorability rise to 100. Wei Wei Bai threw away the whip in her hand and was about to untie the rope. The system suddenly said, "The side mission is forcibly bound and cannot be rejected. Side mission, please maintain the storyline of the world. The host cannot change her personality. If you fail, the 9th heaven Xian thunder will strike your entire family. You, the system, your father, sister, and ancestral graves will all be struck. Wei Wei Bai, what did that mean? She was stupid and didn't understand. This punishment was continuous. Striking her sister was bad enough, but now he was striking her father. Could he be more shameless? Then she finally had the time to look at the memories sent by the system. //. Chapter 345. Originally, when she heard that Ning Yishu's favorability was at 3, she couldn't help but smile. However, when she finished reading the memories, the smile on her face slowly became sluggish. Her expression also slowly turned cold. In the end, she maintained the two emojis of, "Are you fucking kidding me?" and, "No, I must be dreaming." She thought that encountering the system was already the most bizarre thing. She didn't expect that one day, she would be able to transmigrate to another plane. The system didn't send her memories at all, but a novel. The title of the novel was The Unique and Unhindered Immortal Path. The male lead was called Ning Yishu, the typical male lead of a novel. His life was bleak, and he was a jinx who caused the death of his entire family. He grew up like a beggar under the disdainful gazes of others. Later, by chance, he entered Grand Heaven's Mountain and became Wei Wei Bai's disciple. Ning Yishu's spirit root was different from others. Others had metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and so on. He was the only one with a pure yang body. When Grand Heaven's Mountain tested his spirit root, they didn't see this kind of spirit root, so they mistakenly tested it as a fire spirit root. Ning Yishu thought that if he became Wei Wei Bai's disciple, his path would be smooth. However, there was a special part about his pure yang body. It was that when he was a virgin, he couldn't cultivate at all. Soon, Wei Wei Bai discovered that he was a piece of trash who couldn't cultivate. In her anger, she tortured and humiliated him every day. She even let others bully and suppress him. Ning Yishu endured the humiliation and felt extremely inferior, so he didn't dare to resist. Until Wei Wei Bai reached a bottleneck in her cultivation, she needed a kind of elixir to help her. That elixir required a person with a single fire spirit root as a catalyst. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai didn't hesitate to throw Ning Yishu into the furnace to refine the elixir. Ning Yishu obviously wouldn't die like that. In his rage, he activated his pure yang cheat, broke open the furnace, and escaped. In the end, he was hit by the furious Wei Wei Bai and fell off the cliff. At this point, the story was only 1/10 of the beginning. Like all the male protagonists in Shuang Shuang novels, he fell off a cliff and encountered a great adventure. Ning Yishu began his counterattack and began a path of face-slapping. He destroyed Grand Heaven's Mountain. He skinned and cut off Wei Wei Bai's flesh to refine it into a pill. Their souls were also extracted and refined, and they were tortured for eternity, unable to reincarnate. When Bai Weiwei saw this, she expressed that her whole person was not good. The rest of the story had nothing to do with her. In any case, Ning Yishu was noble, elegant, and down-to-earth. He did all the things that a straightforward male lead would do. Take in underlings, flirt with beauties, and fight bosses. The standard ending was to successfully break through the void and ascend to immortality. This was the plot of the entire book, The Unique and Unique. And she was obviously not wearing an ordinary plane. Instead, he had transmigrated into this book. Fortunately, when she transmigrated, the story had yet to unfold. Ning Yishu had only been under her tutelage for a year. The original owner had yet to refine Ning Yishu into pills and throw him off the cliff. Ning Yishu had yet to go on a killing spree, and neither had he skinned her to refine pills. Unfortunately, the original owner had already beaten, scolded, and tortured Ning Yishu for a year. And 3 months later, she was going to refine the male lead into pills. At the beginning, Ning Yishu admired his master, and the 30 points of favorability he had generated were now almost gone. Wei Bai knocked on the system, so this is a book. Then I have to maintain my character of torturing the main character, throw him off the cliff, and wait for him to come back and skin me alive. The system said, in theory, yes. Wei Bai said, there's something I don't know. The system said, don't say it. Wei Bai, the system added, this is a special plane. You can't change the plot of this book. When conquering this world, you can't easily change the original owner's character. Wei Bai asked, what's the original owner's character? The system said, she's cruel and ruthless. She's a villain in the early stages of the book who tortures Ning Yishu every day for fun. Wei Bai thought, damn, how do we conquer this? Who would fall in love with a vicious woman who tortures him every day and wants to refine him into pills? The Transmigration System, Prince Charming, come here. The Transmigration System, Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration System, Prince Charming, come here. The Transmigration System, Prince Charming, come here, / you can see it the next time you open the bookshelf. Chapter 346. The most difficult world to conquer in history. No other. Wei Bai held back her anger and suddenly reached out to untie Ning Yishu's ropes. Ning Yishu seemed to feel it and slowly looked at her. Master, you're not going to hit him. The system reminded her, the original owner's personality would not be gentle to Ning Yishu. Do you want to break your character settings and be struck by lightning? Wei Bai's fingers stiffened for a long time and 10,000 curses ran through her mind. In the end, she struggled to pull her hand back and then ignored Ning Yishu and turned to leave. She was really worried that she would break her character settings and be struck by lightning. The hope in Ning Yishu's eyes dimmed. He saw Bai Wei, dressed in white and as beautiful as a fairy, leave. She was extremely cold and when she looked at him, her eyes were filled with disgust. Sure enough, no one in this world would like him. Ning Yishu's insistence on the light in his heart finally collapsed under Wei Bai's disgust. He slowly revealed a desperate smile. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 0. Wei Bai heard the favorability notification and her tears almost fell. If she could change the plot, she would put him down and coax him in her arms. If she was a bit nicer to him, his favorability would reach 100. How was she going to conquer this? This was the first time she had no confidence in the mission. Suddenly, Wei Bai stopped, not breaking my character settings. Does it mean not breaking in front of Ning Yishu or in front of everyone? The system flipped through the guide. It's fine as long as you don't break in front of the protagonist. Wei Bai let out a sigh of relief. Why didn't you say so earlier? She suddenly pointed at a disciple passing by. Go put Ning Yishu down and treat him properly. The disciple was a bit surprised. Yes, Martial Granduncle. Wei Bai was at nascent soul stage and had a very high status. All the disciples had to call her Martial Grandaunt. Wei Bai was afraid that her image would be exposed in front of Ning Yishu, so she specifically instructed, don't tell him that it was my order. The disciple did his duty and acknowledged. After the disciple left, Wei Bai quietly followed him. That disciple put Ning Yishu down from the wooden frame. Let's go. I'll take you to treatment. In Ning Yishu's gloomy eyes, there was not a single ripple. He coldly sized up that disciple. This was someone who had bullied him before. What is your purpose? The disciple suddenly sneered. If it weren't for Martial Granduncle's instructions, halfway through his sentence, he suddenly remembered Wei Bai's instructions and immediately shut his mouth. Then, he angrily pushed Ning Yishu to the ground. You inauspicious piece of trash. I was kind enough to bring you for treatment, but you're being pretentious. Ning Yishu's body was extremely weak from the torture. He fell to the ground and had no strength left. He could only let that disciple kick him. His face revealed a pained expression, but he did not make a sound. His eyes gradually turned cold as a cold lake. Wei Wei Bai said, I seem to see a future where I will die miserably in the future. When Ning Yishu returned, this place where everyone bullied him would definitely be destroyed by him. And she, the one who bullied him the most, would definitely die the most miserable death. The system said coldly, I believe that you can succeed in your counterattack. I'll cheer you on mentally. Wei Wei Bai, she did not expect anything from this piece of trash system. She could only pull an accessory from her waist. Her body naturally knew how to use spiritual energy. She raised her hand. The accessory broke through the air, passed through the window, and hit the disciple hard. The disciple let out a scream and fainted. Wei Wei Bai did not expect that she would have such strong strength. Ning Yishu almost immediately realized that someone was outside the window. He rushed to the window. Wei Wei Bai immediately ran out. If he knew that she had saved him, his character would have collapsed. / Chapter 347. Ning Yishu did not see anyone, and his body could not take it anymore. He was afraid that others would misunderstand that he was the one who knocked out this disciple. At that time, an even more terrible punishment would definitely be added to his head. Ning Yishu thought of Wei Wei Bai's cold figure as she left. A trace of hatred finally flashed through his eyes. Why did everyone bully him? Was it because he was a good-for-nothing? Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -5. Ning Yishu stumbled as he was about to leave, but suddenly stopped. He saw the jade pendant with a light green tassel on the ground. It looked familiar. Who saved him? Ning Yishu reached out and picked up the jade pendant before leaving. With great difficulty, he returned to his dilapidated little house. He felt cold, and there were wounds all over his body. The pain of his flesh splitting open tormented him until he began to roll around. He bit the blanket, enduring until he broke out in cold sweat. Ning Yishu had been bullied since he was young, and he always wanted to escape this fate. When the cultivators passing by said that he had spirit roots, he was so happy that he forgot himself. He thought that by entering Grand Heaven's Mountain and taking Wei Wei Bai as his master, he could escape his fate of being bullied. In the end, he fell into an even deeper hell. Tears suddenly flowed out of his eyes. Ning Yishu stared fiercely at the wall. He was not willing. He was not willing to be tortured to death like this. His wounds were too heavy, and he soon lost consciousness. The high fever made him muddle-headed. Wei Wei Bai waited outside for most of the night, and finally Ning Yishu became confused. Only then did she enter the room like a cat, and reach out to touch his forehead. This high fever could burn a genius into a fool. Wei Wei Bai took out the healing medicine unique to this cultivation world, and fed it to Ning Yishu. She could not help but complain to the system, this won't increase favorability. Nonsense, Ning Yishu did not even know who she was. How could she increase favorability? The system retorted, then what are you doing? Wei Wei Bai sighed. Let him have a better impression of Grand Heaven's Mountain. In the future, when he thinks that someone is here to save him, his mood will improve, and I'll die a better death. After Ning Yishu drank the medicine, he moaned comfortably. Wei Wei Bai reached out and touched his forehead. The fever was almost gone, and the wound was healing at a visible rate. It was indeed a cultivation plane. How illogical. Suddenly, her hand was grabbed by Ning Yishu. He opened his eyes in confusion. Who? When he was in so much pain and despair, an incomparably cool power healed his wounds. He felt someone gently caressing his forehead. This gentleness shook his wounded heart. This kind of gentleness was simply a kind of bright salvation to those who were in the dark hell. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 0. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. Even if he doesn't know that I saved him, his favorability would increase. The system flipped through the information again. Yes, even if he doesn't know who you are, his favorability towards you is directly added to your head. Wei Wei Bai said, then I'll help him in the dark every day. His favorability will increase. The system said earnestly, don't be found out, just violate the character setting. Wei Wei Bai was about to nod when she realized that Ning Yishu's eyes were already open. His eyes were extremely clear. Why did you save me? Wei Wei Bai was shocked. She immediately shook off his hand and turned to leave. Ning Yishu was anxious. He reached out to grab her, but only managed to grab a corner of her skirt. He tore a piece off. The air was filled with a faint fragrance. This fragrance made him frown. Why was it so familiar? He remembered that the person who saved him was a woman. She was wearing a veil, so he could not see her face clearly. But he could feel that she was a very beautiful woman. In this grand heavens mountain, the most beautiful woman was undoubtedly Wei Wei Bai. But, Ning Yishu sneered. His master hated him, so why would she save him? Then he finally saw the color of the skirt in his hand. It was white. Chapter 348. Wei Wei Bai did not know that her skirt had already aroused Ning Yishu's suspicion. She was still discussing the loopholes of the side quest with the system. In the novel, Wei Wei Bai's character is stupid and bad. She's the perfect example of a cannon fodder whose brain was eaten by a dog. In other words, as long as I maintain this impression in front of Ning Yishu, I won't violate the character setting, right? The system said, yes, you just have to make sure that you finish the storyline and make Ning Yishu think that you're stupid and bad. As for the others, they have nothing to do with your side quest, so you can do whatever you want. Wei Wei Bai thought seriously, with the original owner's personality, would she suddenly fall in love with Ning Yishu? The system said, don't think about such impossible things, Ning Yishu is just a child in the original owner's eyes. Wei Wei Bai suddenly remembered, how old am I? Nascent soul stage seemed to take a long time to cultivate. The system said, more than 100 years old. More than 100, more than 100, more than 100 years old. The system kindly reminded, Ning Yishu is only 18. Wei Wei Bai clutched her chest, was this an old cow eating young grass? No, no, this was the witch of the Black Mountain fetish. This age difference was not cute at all. The system said, it's okay, the cultivation world goes on for thousands of years. Time flies like a white horse, passing in the blink of an eye. 100 years old is the age of a budding girl in the cultivation world. Wei Wei Bai said, then what is the 18-year-old Ning Yishu? A fertilized egg. The system was speechless. Wei Wei Bai said, my storyline is when Ning Yishu is in Grand Heavens Mountain, I have to torture him and beat him up every day. 3 months later, I have to use him for alchemy and make sure that the quality of the alchemy furnace is tofu, so that he can escape, and when he escapes to the edge of the cliff, I have to accurately hit him down with a palm strike. In this book, Bai Wei Wei was a little villain with a thin character. That was all her plots added up to. Wei Wei Bai expressed that there were tens of thousands of novels, but there were only a few routines. The villains had to target the protagonist for no reason. The protagonist would jump off cliffs and mountains at the drop of a hat and run into an old grandpa or an exotic flower or a mythical unicorn. Then, he used his cheats all the way, crushing the villains, becoming immortals and gods, and reaching the peak. Can't you be a little more creative? The system replied, yes, that's basically it. Wei Wei Bai, what if I kiss him when I hit him? The system said, your character settings will collapse. Wei Wei Bai, what if you have no other choice? Wei Bai, so you're saying that I'm unscrupulous and ruthless, right? System, this is the first time I've heard someone describe themselves in such a refreshing and refined manner. Wei Bai, then what if I'm accidentally poisoned or possessed, and I need the pure young body to relieve it? If I have no other choice but to pounce on Ningyi Shu, wouldn't that not collapse my character settings? The system was dumbfounded. How did the host even think of this? Normally, when people heard that they couldn't collapse their character settings, wouldn't they insist on maintaining the original plot and character settings? Wei Bai, since I have no other choice, it shouldn't be considered a collapse of character settings, right? The system said, how do you have no other choice? Feed yourself an aphrodisiac. Wei Bai, that's a good idea. The system was speechless. Wei Bai recalled the state of her body. I have a water single spirit root, and the technique I cultivate is the water spirit scripture. However, there's a disadvantage to this technique. When I reach a bottleneck, the energy in my body will be in chaos and my body temperature will drop. Only pure yang or fire energy can help me overcome this difficulty. This was also the reason why the original owner wanted to turn Ningyi Shu into a pill 3 months later. Therefore, as long as she damaged the spiritual energy in her body, she would be in danger. She would be able to hug and kiss Ningyi Shu openly, and make him feel like she was using him. Character settings would not collapse. Kissing would still be the same. She didn't believe that his favorability would not increase. Chapter 349. Suddenly, the system reminded her, oh no, the male lead suspects that you saved him, so he's pushing the door open to attack you. Wei Bai was confused, then she looked down and saw that a corner of her dress was missing. She then remembered that Ningyi Shu tore off half of her dress last night. Wei Bai's expression changed, I'll change right away. Ningyi Shu saw her torn dress when he came in, so how could he not understand? She quickly took off the dress and stuffed it under the bed. The system reminded her, you know magic, use magic to transform into clothes. This smooth white, it's going to scare this little disciple to death. Wei Bai was confused, and immediately transformed. I'll transform, change clothes. The system couldn't bear to look. The clothes were transformed, but she wasn't familiar with the process, so she transformed into a sexy thin robe. But the door was suddenly pushed open. Ningyi Shu's cold voice respectfully sounded, Master, this disciple is here to pay his respects. Ningyi Shu was very reluctant to look for Wei Bai. Because he knew that every time he came, he would be met with his master's disgusted eyes and a beating. But that jade pendant, that fragrance, and that piece of white cloth. He finally remembered that these were Wei Bai's things. He thought about it, and there was even a faint expectation in his heart. Did his master finally see him in a new light, so she saved him? He bent down as soon as he entered, but his eyes secretly looked up. Wei Bai always wore a white gauze dress. If she didn't change her clothes, suddenly, his eyes stared straight, and his whole body froze. Wei Bai was lying sideways on the recliner, her black hair cascading down like a waterfall, draping over her snow-white body. She was only wearing a thin, translucent white gauze, which stuck to her tender and smooth skin, like a layer of mist faintly discernible. Her eyes were half closed, her eyelashes trembling slightly, and her snow-white hands supporting her head, as if she was enduring something. The air was filled with a faint fragrance. For a moment, Ningyi Shu couldn't move his body or his mind. Only the fragrance lingering in his nose and the portrait of a beauty lying on her side. It was branded into his eyes. Wei Bai suddenly opened her eyes as if she had just realized that someone was there. She coldly spat out a word from her pink lips, who? Ningyi Shu was shocked and immediately lowered his head. Wei Bai was a nascent soul cultivator, but she didn't notice his arrival. His heart was filled with astonishment, but he didn't reveal it in the slightest. He immediately said respectfully, "Master, Ning Yishu greets you." Just as he finished speaking, a white water sleeve condensed from spiritual energy tore through the air and fiercely attacked him. Ning Yishu felt a heavy blow to his chest as he was sent flying and slammed into the wall. The excruciating pain caused his vision to turn black. Before he could react, a cold hand had already strangled his neck. Wei Wei Bai easily lifted him up and slammed him into the wall. This was a brutal cabotin. "What did you see?" Wei Wei Bai's face was like ice, her eyes were cold, and her tone was heavy and full of killing intent. Ning Yishu looked at her, suffocating. The two of them were too close. Her nearly naked body was sticking to him. The thin gauze couldn't cover anything at all. It could only cause one's imagination to run wild. Disciple. Disciple didn't look up. "I didn't see anything." Could Ning Yishu still say that he saw her body? Wei Wei Bai sneered, "You piece of trash. You actually dared to enter my room without notice. Killing you will make my Grand Heaven's Mountain lose less face." The original owner was furious and cruel. She was good at finding people to vent her anger on. When Ning Yishu was found to have a single fire spiritual root, Grand Heaven's Mountain thought that they had picked up a treasure. Wei Wei Bai was also happy that she had a disciple with outstanding aptitude. But in the end, he was trash that couldn't cultivate. Chapter 350. This matter made Grand Heaven's Mountain suffer ridicule. Wei Wei Bai felt even more humiliated. So she abused Ning Yishu even more. Wei Wei Bai wondered why the original owner of her transmigration all liked to seek death. What was even worse was that she had to continue doing it after coming here. Her fingers pinched and Ning Yishu's neck began to bleed. Ning Yishu couldn't breathe and his chest felt like it was going to explode. His eyes finally showed a trace of pleading. His mouth couldn't make a sound, but it opened and closed to beg for mercy. Wei Wei Bai gave a cold laugh, "Go die, you disgraceful piece of trash." After saying this, her fingers tightened and Ning Yishu felt the arrival of death. As expected, how could the person who saved him be his master? He was a piece of trash that had lost everyone's face, so he deserved to be humiliated and abandoned. Why did he have hope in his heart and break into her room, thinking that he could obtain a trace of warmth and comfort? Ning Yishu's eyes were filled with death aura. After the death aura, there was a faint golden light that flashed, bringing with it a cold destructive aura. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to -10. Wei Wei Bai silently cried in her heart. There was no way she could do this work. She felt that she should have dispelled the doubts in Ning Yishu's heart, but she couldn't really strangle him to death. When Ning Yishu was on the verge of death, he saw a golden light in front of him. A kind of power that was hidden in his body began to faintly flow. Just as he was about to explode, Wei Wei Bai suddenly let go of her hand. Her face suddenly paled and blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. She suddenly staggered back several steps and finally fell to the ground. Ning Yishu also sat on the ground, his hands and feet weak. The golden light in his eyes disappeared again. He coughed a few times and looked up to see Wei Wei Bai curled up into a ball. Her black hair was covered in a layer of white frost. His face was even paler than before, so pale that it was emitting cold air. Wei Wei Bai choked and coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. Sweat actually appeared on her forehead. As soon as the sweat appeared, it turned into ice beads and fell to the ground. Even the air had lost its temperature. The entire room was like an ice cave. Ning Yishu had never seen anything like this before. Did something go wrong with Wei Wei Bai's cultivation? "Master!" Ning Yishu cautiously called out. Wei Wei Bai did not respond. He slowly stood up from the ground, and the submissive expression on his face disappeared. A murderous coldness appeared on his face. He thought of the days when he painstakingly sought immortality but was abused by Wei Wei Bai. Being bullied and suppressed by the disciples of Grand Heaven's Mountain was all because of this woman. The beautiful vision of cultivation in his heart was crushed bit by bit in her hands. The law of the jungle, cruelty and heartlessness, this was what Grand Heaven's Mountain had taught him. No one knew that he was looking for Wei Wei Bai. If he killed her, Ning Yishu walked step by step towards Wei Wei Bai. He stared at her, but his tone was incomparably gentle. "Master, what happened to you?" Wei Wei Bai did not answer. Her entire body was trembling. She was so weak that she could not withstand a single blow. Ning Yishu's murderous intent intensified. This was a good opportunity. He had obtained a small dagger by chance. There were ominous bloodstains on it. He tested its spiritual power and found that it was actually a rare magic weapon. As long as the dagger pierced the heart, even if it was a nascent soul cultivator, their soul would immediately scatter. Even their nascent soul would be shattered. Ning Yishu was incomparably nervous. He walked to her side and pretended to support her. Just as his fingers touched her snow-white arm, a chill immediately spread to his fingertips. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 351. After Ning Yishu returned to his rundown house, he found it hard to calm down. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, she would probably kill him. He had to run away immediately. However, Grand Heaven's Mountain had a mountain protecting array. If he didn't have an exit token, he wouldn't be able to leave. He was hated by everyone in Grand Heaven's Mountain, so he couldn't get an exit token. Could it be that he could only wait for death? Just now, he shouldn't have run away. He should have stabbed Wei Wei Bai and let her die. Ning Yishu thought that he would die soon. After all, he understood Wei Wei Bai's temperament. He treated her like that. She would skin him alive and pull out his tendons. However, after trembling in fear for a few days, Wei Wei Bai seemed to have forgotten about him. She didn't call anyone to kill him. Ning Yishu asked around and found out that the Scarlet Moon Mountain's mystic realm was about to open. All the major sects sent people to prepare to enter and seize the mystic realm's immortal treasures. Wei Wei Bai was busy with this and didn't have time to care about him. However, Ning Yishu didn't relax because he knew that the crisis wasn't really over yet. If he was strong enough, Ning Yishu calmed his heart and sat in meditation, drawing qi into his body. However, just like before, his dantian was extremely empty. The spiritual energy in the air couldn't be stored in. Ning Yishu clenched his fist and smashed it on the ground. Not a single crack appeared, but his hand was in great pain from the impact. He suppressed his anger and walked to the table and started flipping through the books. This phenomenon had happened to him before. A single spirit root was blocked and couldn't absorb spiritual energy. There was a treasure called the Blessed Flower that grew in the Scarlet Moon Mountain's mystic realm. It had a miraculous effect on blocked spirit roots. However, only disciples above the foundation establishment stage had the qualifications to enter. As for him, he wasn't even at the first level of qi refinement. He didn't have the qualifications to enter. At first, he planned to use the dagger as a magic weapon to bribe the leader to get a spot. However, now, Ning Yishu, Martial Granduncle, is calling for you to go to the Soaring Sky Palace. Suddenly, a Foundation establishment disciple bluntly kicked open the door and said. Ning Yishu lowered his head and hid the coldness in his eyes. He said honestly, "I'll go now. What would come would come." As expected, Wei Wei Bai would not let him off. He walked out of the wooden house and walked forward with heavy footsteps. He arrived at the most magnificent and grand hall of the Grand Heaven's Mountain. He thought that Wei Wei Bai had called him to Soaring Sky Palace to execute him. That was because this hall was the place where the disciples gathered. But when he arrived here, he discovered that all the disciples of Grand Heaven's Mountain had come. The hall was bustling with people. I heard that the Mystic Realm will open early. Marshal Granduncle plans to personally lead the team to the Scarlet Moon Mountain today. That's right. I've heard that this is the last time the Mystery Realm will be open. That's why even the Grandmaster has returned. Ning Yishu was expressionless as he listened to the conversation of the people around him. He did not reveal his disappointment. This was because he knew that this trip to the Mystic Realm had nothing to do with him. Suddenly, the bell outside the door rang, and the sound reverberated throughout the hall. The main door of the hall opened with a loud bang. Grandmaster, Marshal Granduncle has arrived. Everyone looked at the main door. Suddenly, a faintly discernible fragrance filled the air. Ning Yishu smelled the familiar fragrance. Wei Wei Bai's beautiful and tender body seemed to flash before his eyes. His jaw tightened, and he hurriedly waved that image away. Then, he secretly raised his head and froze again. The morning light poured in from the entrance. The woman who stepped into the hall was wearing a watercolored wide-sleeved fairy dress. Her black hair fell to her shoulders, her skin was as white as snow, and her features were so exquisite that they could steal one's soul. It was not that there were no beautiful disciples around. But when she stepped into the hall, everyone's eyes dimmed. It was as if she was the only one who could shine. TXT. Chapter 352. It was clearly the same as before, but why was it so much more exquisite today? Ning Yishu's mind was in a mess. He hurriedly lowered his head, not daring to look again. When Wei Wei Bai walked into the hall, she was in a bad mood. Because the system's notification sounded at the same time. Ding, I am the most beautiful metal activated. The light board is ready. All female animals will automatically turn black. Rose petal perfume will be sprayed. Wei Wei Bai, the background music sounds, the boundless horizon is my love, the flowers are blooming at the foot of the green mountain. Wei Wei Bai's face was drained of color. What the hell was this? She was so embarrassed that she wanted to fly. Grand Heaven Mountain's Grandmaster, Chiu Bai, who was also at the nascent soul stage, was shocked. Junior sister, we haven't seen each other in 2 years. You really have a way to maintain your youthful appearance. You're simply glowing. Wei Wei Bai, hee hee. If you were to stand among the African natives, a sow would surpass a cicada. So this was the function of this medal. For the rest of the matter, Bai Weiwei just had to sit on the side with a cold face and enjoy the cool air. Chiu Bai took charge. After announcing all the disciples who could enter the mystic realm, she prepared to go to Scarlet Moon Mountain. Wei Wei Bai glanced at Ning Yishu indifferently. She suddenly said coldly, "Come here." Ning Yishu's body tensed up. He lowered his head, his eyes dark, but he still walked out respectfully. "Master." Wei Wei Bai glanced at him with disdain and disgust. "Follow me." Ning Yishu was clearly stunned. He couldn't help but look up. But before he could see Wei Wei Bai clearly, a slap had already landed on his face. "Trash, who allowed you to look up?" Scram. Ning Yishu only felt pain on his face. That slap actually carried a fragrance. This kind of pain was nothing, but the sneers of others and Wei Wei Bai's disgust made him want to kill. He gritted his teeth and endured, "Yes, master." Wei Wei Bai sighed. The male lead of this novel is a classic example of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. In the early stages, they were too weak. Even if they were bullied badly, they would endure it. Later on, when he obtained power, those who bullied him would all suffer a calamity. One of the typical Shuangwen protagonists, black-bellied, cold-hearted, and vengeful. The system replied, "That's right. You can bully him as much as you can. He'll just skin you alive and refine your soul." Wei Wei Bai looked as if she had nothing to live for. She complained sadly, "I'll die miserably if I bully others. If I don't bully others, I'll be struck by lightning. Is it easy for me?" The background music played on loop. "You are the most beautiful cloud in my sky, let me make you stay with all my heart. Wei Wei Bai, can you turn this thing off?" Although others couldn't hear it, they couldn't see the petals dancing in the sky. However, Wei Wei Bai still felt that she was too lowly. The system replied, "This is a tool used by the metal to enhance the atmosphere. Once you appear, I guarantee that there will be a burst of fragrance. Every step you take will be like petals flying out. It has its own light effect, and there will be heavenly music playing. Wei Wei Bai, turn it off." The system replied, "It can't be turned off. If there are other women around, it will be turned on automatically. Wei Wei Bai, if I had known, would have chosen to cook." The disciples of Grand Heaven's Mountain set off towards Crimson Moon Mountain. Ning Yishu followed. No matter what Wei Wei Bai's goal was, as long as he could enter the arcane realm, it was fine. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai's flying beast carriage flew over his head. A white sleeve of spirit energy flew out from the carriage, wrapped around him, and dragged him into the carriage. Ning Yishu rolled into the fragrant carriage and got up without waiting for her to flip over. Before he could get up, a snow-white, delicate foot had already reached his chin. She exerted some force with her round and pink toes and lifted his slightly astonished face. At https://www.sashu.com/full text at https://www.sashu.com download text at https://www.sashu.com at https://m.sashu.com// to make it easier for you to read next time. You can click Save below to record this reading record. Chapter 353. Ning Yishu thought, "How ugly is he? Why is he so annoying?" Wei Wei Bai pointed at a small corner of the carriage and said, "Kneel there, don't be an eyesore." Ning Yishu lowered his head and said respectfully, "Yes." He knelt there quietly with his head down, looking like he was ready to do anything. Wei Wei Bai said, "I think Ning Yishu wants to skin me alive right now." The system said, "I think so too." Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Forget it, how could she expect the system to comfort her? Wei Wei Bai looked up at Ning Yishu. She said coldly, "Raise your head." Ning Yishu hesitated for a while before slowly raising his head. His face was nourished by the elixir, and the bruises were gone. His features were handsome, and his black eyes were clear as if they did not contain any impurities. His face was expressionless, and he looked a little dull and honest. This kind of dull temperament did not detract from his handsome features. If he did not act like an honest person, and his eyes were lively, the effect would probably be the same as hers. With this kind of appearance, wherever he went, there would be a BGM. Wei Wei Bai forced herself to look away and said in a low voice, "Praise me." Ning Yishu was speechless. Wei Wei Bai supported her chin with her hand, looking bored. "Am I beautiful?" This was too shameless. Who would ask someone like this? Ning Yishu was silent for a while before saying, "Master is very beautiful." Wei Wei Bai was not satisfied. "You don't even look at me, how do you know if I'm beautiful or not?" Ning Yishu hesitated for a while before carefully raising his head. What he saw was a barefoot Wei Wei Bai lying on the chair. After she gained some warmth, she looked lively and lively. Her exposed ankles and arms looked like they were carved out of jade. Even if she frowned slightly, her eyes were cold and filled with disgust, but she did not look ferocious. Ning Yishu could not help but say, "Master, you're very beautiful." There was a hint of sincerity in his words. Wei Wei Bai was not satisfied. "Which part of me is beautiful? Tell me. If you can't, then you're lying. Be careful or I'll skin you." Ning Yishu's heart turned cold. What was the use of a good-looking skin? She still had a heart like a snake and scorpion. He quickly pretended to be afraid. "Master, I'm clumsy. I can't say anything nice. I just think you're beautiful everywhere." Bai Weiwei laughed. "With your personality, what you say sounds like the truth. Seeing that you made me happy, I won't hit you today." The original she had a habit. Every she beady shoe she every she. And it was done at a fixed time, with a whip. This was her calm. Wei Wei Bai spent a lot of effort, but she could only come up with such a stupid excuse to not whip him. Striking while the iron was hot, she continued happily, "I love to hear honest people praise me. Praise me more, I'll spare you a day of whipping punishment." Ning Yishu, this. "Master, have you become stupid from the cold?" Although he thought so, he had no reason to reject something that was obviously good for him. So he racked his brains. "Master, you're as beautiful as a fairy, you're a natural beauty." Wei Wei Bai, are you reciting a four-word idiom? What about descriptions, parallels, and metaphors? This praise was too perfunctory and lacking in skill. After Ning Yishu was used to praising her, he felt that it was a bit thin to only use idioms. He could only try his best to observe, and then squeeze out some praise while observing. "Master, your skin is as white as snow, much prettier than the village belle I saw when I was young." "Bai Weiwei, this is so awkward that I can't show my face." She really wanted to take a whip and whip him to death. Chapter 354. And your figure is light and graceful, and your voice is like a silver bell. In front of you, other women are like village women. As Ning Yishu spoke, he suddenly felt that this was not a lie. When he was in the hall, the female disciple who usually looked incomparably beautiful. When Wei Wei Bai came in, no matter how beautiful she was usually, she would dim in an instant. She was even worse than a village woman. "Your black hair is thick and fluffy. If it could be wrapped around his fingertips, it would definitely be so beautiful that it would make people tremble. Your face is crimson like the sunset." Her lips were red without any lipstick, and her eyes were charming but not seductive. Ning Yishu had never observed Wei Wei Bai so carefully. In the past, her image in his heart was that of a vicious woman. Her face was twisted and ugly in his heart. But today, her face was truly in his eyes. Because he took the initiative to observe. He could even feel her beautiful attack power. Ning Yishu's heart trembled as he hurriedly lowered his head. Suddenly, he couldn't say any words of praise. He could speak fluently when it came to lies. He didn't know why, but once he realized that he was telling the truth, he couldn't say a single word. Wei Wei Bai casually looked at her fingers. "Say it, you said it quite well, why didn't you say it?" Ning Yishu's lips moved, but when he lowered his head, he saw that her feet were gently swaying. That exquisite ankle, the beautiful outline of the instep, with light pink toenails, every part was just right. The corner of his mouth moved, and the image of him just now flashed through his mind. This image made his body stiffen. He immediately looked away, his fingernails digging deep into his palms to maintain a clear mind. Then he heard his own wooden voice, "Master is beautiful everywhere. I can't think of any words of praise that are worthy of you." "System, this is an awkward boast, can you be a little bit more shameless?" The scene was silent for a moment. Ning Yishu's mind was also somewhat tense. Suddenly, a chuckle broke the indescribable silence. Wei Wei Bai smiled unusually happily. Since you're honest, I won't beat you for the next few days. I'll beat you again after we return from the mystic realm and return to Grand Heaven Mountain. Ning Yishu lowered his head, his tone sincere and joyful. Thank you, Master. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -10. Wei Wei Bai was smiling on the surface, but she was cursing in her heart. The system said, I feel like our entire family is going to be struck to death by the ninth heaven profound thunder in this plane. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, no, you have to trust me. Even if you don't believe me, you have to believe my face. The system retorted, what can your face do? Are you so thick-skinned that you can block the lightning punishment? Wei Wei Bai. What I meant was that my face is beautiful. The system, speechless, it's not appropriate to say anything. Wei Wei Bai's expression darkened. Why do you think I asked him to say that I'm beautiful? Ning Yishu lowers his head when he sees me, and I only have a vague image in his heart. I'm so vicious and cruel, I'm probably a hag in his heart. So I forced him to say that I'm beautiful, so he has to look at my beautiful face. If he says that I'm beautiful too often, he'll automatically be brainwashed. The system, this is the first time I've seen such a shameless brainwashing method. Wei Wei Bai touched her face fondly. Once a man thinks that a woman is beautiful, then that's when the favorability will soar. The system couldn't hold it in anymore. What if his mind is firm and not moved by beauty? Wei Wei Bai was stunned, thinking about this possibility. Suddenly, she reached out and lifted Ning Yishu's face, kissing him softly without thinking. To make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click the Save button below to record this reading. Chapter 355. The Scarlet Moon Mountain's realm had been opened. Wei Wei Bai stood in front of the realm with a group of Grand Heaven's mountain disciples following behind her. There were people from various sects around her. Ning Yishu had also rushed over, his expression calm. However, when Wei Wei Bai glanced at him, he could not help but feel nervous. Wei Wei Bai said, it's a little awkward to see him. The system said, weren't you awkward when he skinned you? Wei Wei Bai was speechless. The opening of the realm was considered a small climax in the novel. The realm was actually a huge trap formed by the obsessions and desires of all things in the world. After it was opened a few hundred years ago, it had been opened 5 times. The last time the realm was opened this year was also a smokescreen. The first 5 times were to let people know that the realm was harmless and had many treasures, attracting people. This year, with the last gimmick, it finally attracted most of the outstanding disciples of the sections. 8 or 9 out of 10 people who went to the realm were swallowed by the realm as nutrients. And in the novel's plot, Ning Yishu also went. However, because of the activation of his pure yang energy, he escaped death in the realm. Like all the main characters in the novel, he also took away many treasures from the people who were swallowed by the realm. The most important thing was, it was the first time he knew that there was a power in his body that was different from other people's. Although he still could not cultivate, he could not use it freely. However, with the awakened consciousness of this power, he was able to break open the alchemy furnace and escape 3 months later. This time, Wei Wei Bai did not go to the realm. Before she went, she asked the system, can I go, or can the plot not be changed at all? The system said, if the ending is the same, the process is up to you. Just like the result of the realm, the male lead must awaken his pure yang energy and obtain many treasures. As for the process, the details of the novel were not perfect, so it was just casual. Qiu Bai Fengshen stood next to Bai Weiwei. Junior sister, I'll have to trouble you to lead the disciples in with me this time. Wei Wei Bai did not look happy. Yes. Her personality was always unpredictable, so Bai didn't suspect anything. Suddenly, Bai Weiwei heard that familiar reminder come out again. I'm the prettiest metal activated. Lighting engineer, turn on the light board, there are many beauties present. Automatic upgrade function. Beginning Meiti Shosho, a fragrant wind blew past. All of a sudden, it was as if 100 flowers had bloomed. Everything at the scene dimmed, except for Weiwei Bai, who was floating like a fairy, so beautiful that it made people unable to breathe. When they saw her, everyone felt as if their eyes were about to become pregnant. Celestial music seemed to be faintly drifting past his ears, and his nose was filled with the fragrance of flowers. How could there be such an otherworldly woman in this world? Weiwei Bai's heart did not waver. She even felt like killing someone. The background music roared in her ears, the curved river came from the sky, flowing into the sea of colors, the fiery ballad, she really wanted to square dance. Fall. Change the song. Why was her BGM the most dazzling ethnic style? The system said, oh, okay. Then, swan a sound, sister, you sit at the front of the boat. Brother walks on the shore, Weiwei Bai felt like dying. Why did she want to be the most beautiful woman in this world? Bai suddenly held her hand. Junior sister, seeing you today, I finally know what it means to be as beautiful as a fairy. Weiwei Bai, as beautiful as a village flower. The two of them stood at the top, looking like a perfect match. Weiwei Bai suddenly felt something. She looked back and saw Ning Yishu standing in the crowd, looking at her with a dark gaze. When he realized that she had noticed, he lowered his head. But his fingers slowly clenched. /the is at https://m, Sashu. Com save button to record this chapter. Crossover system, Adonis, come over here, comma. Chapter 356. Weiwei Bai pulled her hand back and smiled coldly. Senior brother, let's go. Bai smiled, but there was a hint of treachery in her eyes. Okay, junior sister. The sky suddenly darkened. A huge black cloud condensed. The elders in charge of opening the secret realm used all kinds of Dharma treasures to form a huge formation to open the secret realm. Golden characters appeared in the sky, connecting to form a complicated golden 8-trigram formation. The elders shouted in unison, open. The giant stone door of the secret realm slowly opened in the thick black clouds. Dense spirit chi rushed out of the secret realm. Who knew how many natural treasures were needed to have so much spirit chi? The moment the secret realm opened, all the sects took out their Dharma treasures and started a treasure hunt. At that moment, treasured fans, flying beasts, long swords, and flower baskets carried the disciples of the various sects and charged into the secret realm. Weiwei Bai waved her hand, and a white sleeve of spirit chi appeared. Bai also summoned dozens of flying swords and sent all the Grand Heavens Mountain disciples up. Ning Yishu could only be considered a normal youth and couldn't go up by himself. Bai also forgot about him and led the disciples through the stone door. He stood in the same spot. The empty surroundings made his heart turn cold. All of a sudden, a white water sleeve pierced through the air and wrapped around his waist, pulling him up. Ning Yishu looked up and saw Bai Weiwei's sleeves fluttering in the wind. Her slender hands were tied in water sleeves. She dragged him straight into the clouds and through the stone door. The stone door closed. An ominous black aura appeared in the crack of the door and started to corrode the golden formation. The secret realm was different from the outside world. The sky was an ominous purple, and the 6 moons were glowing in the sky. Under the moon, there were mountains, rivers, forests, and flower fields. Everywhere was beautiful and dangerous. In this place, there was a strange flower every 3 steps and a spirit spring every 5 steps. Everyone split up to harvest the mature spirit herbs. This time, Qiu Bai led the team. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai didn't need to do anything. All she needed to do was accompany Ning Yishu and stroll around. Ning Yishu silently calculated the map of the secret realm that he had seen. He knew that the blessed flower he wanted was not far away. He didn't dare to let Wei Wei Bai see through him, so he could only silently follow behind her. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai turned around and said lazily, "I'm tired. You squat down." Ning Yishu stopped in his tracks and hesitated for a moment before slowly crouching down. Then, he felt Wei Wei Bai's body temperature pressing against him. She leaned on his back and whispered into his ear, "Carry me." It was clearly humiliating. Ning Yishu only felt an itch in his ear. Her warm breath brushed past his sensitive ear, causing the tip of his ear to turn red. He didn't feel the slightest bit of shame in his heart. Instead, he felt a little clumsy. He was afraid that he would drop her. After she absorbed the energy in his body warmed up. He didn't know how long his energy could keep her warm. When Ning Yishu thought of this, his eyes darkened. He wasn't thinking about whether there would be a problem with his body. Instead, he was thinking about when she would need his energy. Ning Yishu coldly sneered at himself in his heart. This kind of poisonous woman should be killed when the opportunity arises. When he carried her to the side of a spirit spring, the dagger in his pocket suddenly heated up. This bloodstained dagger had a warning function. There was something terrifying in the spirit spring. And it was very secretive. Wei Wei Bai didn't seem to have discovered it. The bloodstained dagger would only give a warning to extremely terrifying and cruel dangers. He made many calculations in his heart and finally said softly, "Master, are you tired? Do you want to rest?" to TXT. Chapter 357. Wei Wei Bai, trash, you're the one who's tired. You can't even walk such a short distance. Ning Yishu endured. Wei Wei Bai, forget it, put me down. Ning Yishu didn't think that she would actually agree. He hesitated for a moment before finally making up his mind and putting her on a rock beside the spirit spring. Wei Wei Bai didn't notice anything in the spirit spring. Then he secretly walked a bit further away and even put his hand on his pocket. If she was hurt by something in the spirit spring, he could finish her off. But her movements made him freeze. Wei Wei Bai lifted her foot and her skirt fell to her calf, revealing her snow-white skin. Her tone was cold as if she was calling for a servant. "Come here and take off my shoes." Ning Yishu only felt a bloodthirsty impulse churning in his chest. But under the bloodthirsty impulse, another strange desire faintly emerged. He swallowed his anger, lowered his head, and carefully took off her shoes. When the shoes were taken off, the bells rang. There was a silver anklet on her ankle and there were 2 small emerald green bells on the chain. Every time she shook it, her snow-white skin and emerald green bells gave off a faintly discernible sense of temptation. Ning Yishu's fingers touched her ankle and then left. His fingers actually burned for a moment. Ding, the male lead's affection has increased to 1. Wei Wei Bai. It's been a long time since I've seen such a stingy affection. She shook her foot and said to him, "Help me wash my feet." For a moment, Ning Yishu really wanted to break her foot. But he still endured. He had endured so much humiliation and torture. His heart was like still water before and those tortures couldn't affect his mood. But these days, his mood was clearly out of control. He maintained a wooden expression as he lowered his head and held her feet in his hands. Then, he dipped her feet into the water. The water was sparkling, and her pink toes were curled up, making her look exceptionally cute. Ning Yishu was speechless. How could he find her cute? Hateful was more like it. Did you not eat? Are you going to wash until next year? Bai Weiwei impatiently kicked the water with her foot, splashing it on his face. When the water droplets fell from his beautiful eyebrows, his eyes turned terrifyingly dark for a moment. Then, he quickly lowered his eyes. This disciple's technique is unfamiliar, and I'm afraid I'll offend Master. With that said, his hand covered her instep. His Adam's apple bobbed as his fingers gently slid across the skin of her instep. He suddenly realized that it was somewhat difficult for him to maintain his previous indifference. Weiwei Bai complained to the system as she mischievously played around. TSK, an 18-year-old boy in his budding years. Even a female pig would want to have sex with him, not to mention someone as beautiful as me, the system said. Prepare the background music, the boundless horizon is my love, Weiwei Bai said, shut up. Suddenly, the water was filled with a fishy smell. The water turned red, and it was frightening. The red water column turned into a sharp blade, and suddenly attacked Weiwei Bai. Weiwei Bai's expression changed, and she retracted her foot from the water, and the bell on her ankle rang. The bell rang clearly, and a green light blocked the attack of the red blood spring. She flung out her water sleeve, and wrapped it around Ning Yishu's body, and the two of them left the water at the same time. The water boiled, and a huge eye appeared. The white of the eye was red, and the pupil was nowhere to be seen. It was disgusting and scary. It opened its mouth full of fangs, and an ominous red mist filled the air. The is at https://m, Sashu. Calm, there. Chapter 358. The red mist was highly poisonous. Even Ning Yishu, who had guessed that there was a monster in the spring, changed his expression. He did not expect the poison to be an indiscriminate attack. Looking at the speed at which the poison was spreading, there was no way he could escape. Just as the red mist was about to hit him, a cool water vapor instantly wrapped around him. Trash, stay aside. Weiwei Bai looked at him sarcastically, then turned around and waved her hand. Her water sleeves danced in the air, and clean water droplets danced in the air. Her footsteps were light and calm, and every step she took had the rhythm of a dancer. The red poisonous mist could not even get close to her body. The clean water droplets condensed into water streams and turned into water-colored satin sleeves, breaking the invasion of the mist. Ning Yishu had never seen Weiwei Bai fight before. The enemies that the bloodstained dagger warned of were usually very strong. But this monster did not even have the strength to fight back in front of Weiwei Bai. Moreover, the way she fought was different from any battle he had ever seen. It was so beautiful that it was like dancing. Weiwei Bai was dancing. Although her body was not good in real life, it was not that bad when she was young. So she practiced classical dance, and with her spiritual energy, she felt very good when she danced. I feel like I'm going to fly. Weiwei Bai looked at her water sleeves with satisfaction, beating the monster until it cried out. The system said, the background music is playing, I want to fly higher, fly higher. The beauty that she painstakingly created was shattered with one hit. Weiwei Bai had nothing to live for, even acting cool had to be destroyed by the background music. She did not have the heart to continue acting, and with a few water sleeves, the monster in the spring was completely destroyed. The spring was calm again, and only the monster's remains were left floating on the water. She pulled back her water sleeves smoothly, her skirt fluttering without wind, and her hair was as black as ink. Amidst the water vapor that filled the air, she raised her eyebrows from the side of her face, and the corners of her mouth curled up into a smile. There was actually a hint of playfulness that was rarely seen. A mere monster condensed from resentment dares to be so presumptuous in front of me. He was clearly still in that mocking posture. So hateful and heartless. For the first time, Ning Yishu felt that this was how she should be. Her mind was moved again. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 5. Wei Wei Bai turned around, took back the water satin on his body, and then looked at him coldly. You are simply a disgrace to my Grand Heaven's Mountain. Once my body recovers, you can scram off Grand Heaven's Mountain. A piece of trash like you is not fit to be my disciple. Ning Yishu felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He froze for a moment. Only then did he reply calmly, Yes, Master. He tried to make this reply emotionless. But he was so tense that it was unnatural. Wei Wei Bai could not be bothered to look at him. Let's go. Ning Yishu was silent for a while before he followed her. However, before they could take 2 steps, Wei Wei Bai suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body swayed and she fell directly onto Ning Yishu, who was following behind her. The spiritual energy in her body was in chaos. Her damaged meridians were ravaged by the spiritual energy, making them even more serious. Ning Yishu hugged her. Master, what happened to you? Wei Wei Bai coughed out 2 mouthfuls of blood. Damn it, my body had to have problems at this time. She coldly ordered, Kiss me. His power could help her recover her body. A trace of viciousness flashed through Ning Yishu's eyes. At this time, he took out a dagger and ruthlessly stabbed it into her body. He would be able to kill her. Wei Wei Bai frowned. What are you dawdling for? Ning Yishu hesitated for a while, but in the end, he gave up on this risky plan. Then he lowered his head and gently kissed her lips. The coolness and fragrance on her lips intertwined with his burning breath. Without waiting for her to absorb the power in his body, a cold laugh rang out. I didn't expect that junior apprentice sister, who looks as pure as ice and clean as jade, would actually be a lewd whore, getting together with your own disciple. Just as these words fell, a sword light directly attacked Wei Wei Bai. // Chapter 359. You can search Time Transmigration System, Adonis, come to Sashu. Calm on Baidu to find the. Ning Yishu was hugging Wei Wei Bai. This sharp sword light was planning to pierce through him as well. He couldn't dodge and thought that he was definitely going to die. Suddenly, Bai Weiwei's palm hit him hard, and he was pushed away. Ning Yishu rolled a few times and hit a rock. He looked forward dizzily. What he saw shocked him and made his hands and feet turn cold. That sword light stabbed into her body and blood immediately flowed out, dyeing her dress red. If she hadn't pushed him away, he would have died. All sorts of thoughts flashed through Ning Yishu's mind. He thought that she would directly drag him to be that sword light. Wei Wei Bai was covered in blood. She looked at Ning Yishu with a pale face. Come here, she said weakly. This was a very good chance to escape. The person who slowly walked out of the forest was clearly targeting Wei Wei Bai and not him. But as if at the behest of demons and gods, Ning Yishu's hands and feet were extremely fast, and he flew in front of Bai Wei Wei. He hugged her, his hands covered in blood. Master. When he called out, his lips were trembling. He covered her wound with his hand but the blood couldn't be stopped. Wei Wei Bai panted weakly and ignored Ning Yishu. The man who walked out of the forest was actually Qiu Bai. He still looked kind and kind. Junior sister, how could you be so careless? I felt that there was something wrong with your spirit energy these few days. I didn't expect that you were in a state of bedevilment. If you had told me earlier, I wouldn't have watched you suffer. Wei Wei Bai looked at him angrily. Qiu Bai, what do you mean? Qiu Bai's smile was still the same. Junior sister, you have grown older but your brain hasn't. You are still so stupid. Wei Wei Bai, I can tolerate being stabbed, but I can't tolerate being older. Slagstem, do you have a cheat? Kill that bastard for me. I bought you a painkiller. You only have a little bit of HP left, so we have to save it. Don't learn from those wastrels. Wei Bai held back her anger as shock filled her eyes. Senior brother, have you been possessed? How dare you attack me? Qiu Bai laughed sinisterly. Stop pretending, junior sister. Do you think I don't know how vicious and merciless you are? Haven't you long been on guard against me? Wei Bai finally had the time to flip through the novel. There were hundreds of millions of words in the long leveling up novel. She was tired of just reading the main points. She didn't have much of an impression of a small character like Qiu Bai. After reading Qiu Bai's plot, it seemed that after Ning Yishu was kicked off the cliff, Grand Heaven's Mountain started to become chaotic. Qiu Bai and Bai Weiwei already found each other unpleasing to the eye. Along with the fact that they didn't have enough resources to split between them, the power of a mountain could only allow one person to break through to nascent soul. Thus, Qiu Bai revealed his sinister side and Weiwei Bai wasn't a good person either. The two of them started to fight. In the end, Weiwei Bai won. Then, Ning Yishu returned to slap her face and she was killed. All the treasures and resources were taken by the male lead. What was the point of fighting? It was better to sit down and have a heart-to-heart talk. After all, the male lead would be the one in the end. Hee hee. With the plot, Weiwei Bai laughed coldly. Qiu Bai, we are from the same sect. You actually attacked me so cruelly. Qiu Bai's sword danced in the air as he acted like a human. Junior sister, I once asked for your hand in marriage and wanted to dual cultivate with you. You didn't know what was good for you and rejected me. Weiwei Bai was infuriated. You know that I cultivate the water spirit scripture and need to protect my primordial yin. Where did you get the face to ask me to dual cultivate with you? You're the only one who benefits. What awaits me is my cultivation being destroyed. Qiu Bai, you have such a vicious heart. /save button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 360. Qiu Bai, how can he compare to you? You kill people for cultivation resources and you take in a disciple but beat and scold him every day. Bai Weiwei, this is a pot that doesn't boil. Qiu Bai suddenly smiled amiably. Ning Yishu, right? In terms of seniority, you should call me Martial Uncle. Listen to my advice, this woman is extremely evil. Her spirit energy is in chaos and she has been absorbing your spirit energy to heal herself. If you don't kill her, what awaits you is the destruction of your spirit root. Ning Yishu couldn't help but tighten his grip on Weiwei Bai. So she had been absorbing his spirit energy all this time. If a person's spirit energy was depleted to a certain extent, their spirit root would indeed be destroyed. Weiwei Bai said fiercely, "Shut up, bitch." With that, a white water sleeve appeared in the air and wrapped around Qiu Bai's sword. Qiu Bai's expression turned cold. You're so heavily injured and you still think you can defeat me. With that, the sword flashed and the water sleeve shattered. Weiwei Bai felt a tightness in her chest and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Without even thinking, she raised her head and kissed Ning Yishu. The energy in his body entered her body. Ning Yishu's heart turned even colder. She was really treating him like trash and using him. Although he didn't know how much spirit energy he had left, Weiwei Bai was absorbing it like this. His spirit root would be destroyed sooner or later. Qiu Bai laughed arrogantly. Ning Yishu, I'll teach you a method. As long as you concentrate your energy in your dantian and block the path of the spirit energy, no one will be able to absorb your spirit energy. Weiwei Bai's face was pale and her lips trembled. She had absorbed some energy. However, it was still very painful. She laughed coldly. How could my disciple listen to you? With that, Wei Wei Bai seemed to want to confirm something and looked coldly at Ning Yishu. Kiss me. It was still a simple word. It carried the disdain of a command. But Ning Yishu could feel the tension in her body and the bone-chilling coldness of her skin. He lowered his eyes and her blood kept flowing out from his fingers. Even the blood was cold. Ning Yishu's rationality told him that this was the best chance to get rid of Wei Wei Bai. Kiss me. Bai Wei Wei repeated again. Her tone was cold, but there was a trace of trembling. He didn't know if it was because of the cold, but her face revealed a kind of pure white, fragile indifference. This woman is so vicious. Ning Yishu suddenly lowered his head and pressed his lips against hers. That familiar power surged up again and entered Bai Weiwei's body. Her body immediately relaxed the spirit energies to calm. Calm, the scene of a woman wearing a flying immortal dress lying in the man's arms and the two of them kissing was actually especially beautiful. Chiu Bai and the system, I feel like I've been stuffed with a mouth full of dog food. Chiu Bai's smile suddenly became twisted. Junior sister, you're really not picky. You're actually doing it with your disciple in broad daylight. Wei Wei Bai absorbed some of the energy and the spirit energy started to heal her wounds. The blood finally stopped. She glanced over and said in disdain, being with my disciple is better than being with trash like you. With that, she reached out and hugged Ning Yishu's waist. She leaned her head on his chest and her voice suddenly became gentle. Even if he's trash, he's still better than you. When she said this, her soft body leaned against him without any defense. Ning Yishu lowered his head and saw her smile. It was a smile of disdain, but he was in high spirits. Chiu Bai's face immediately darkened. You don't know shame. Chapter 363. Wei Wei Bai said, the male lead's pure yang energy exploded. Didn't he explode because he wanted to escape from the hidden realm's danger? Why did it happen earlier? The system said, since it happened in the hidden realm, it doesn't count as the plot breaking. When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she relaxed. Chiu Bai had a shocked expression on his face. Although his brain was damaged, he still had the necessary reactions. When he saw Ning Yishu's change, he hurriedly took out his flying sword. However, when the sword flew over, it suddenly went out of control. Chiu Bai couldn't care less about Wei Wei Bai and immediately jumped up. White spirit energy wrapped around the flying sword. He grabbed the sword and flew in front of Ning Yishu, wanting to kill him in one strike. Ning Yishu suddenly went crazy. The restraints on his body were broken by the golden light. A huge wave of energy crazily surged out. The golden light was like a hurricane, forcing Chiu Bai's sword back. Chiu Bai was shocked. What kind of power was this? Ning Yishu didn't give him any chance to retreat. His mind was heavy as a terrifying power surged within him. A stubborn thought kept appearing in his heart. Kill him, kill this man. It wasn't like he had never been humiliated before, but today was the first time he was angrier than ever. Chiu Bai was a nascent soul expert. Even if Ning Yishu suddenly exploded with terrifying power, he still couldn't do anything. How could he not have the ability to retaliate? Just as he was about to use a big move, he suddenly realized that his spirit energy was being drained. Wei Wei Bai felt the same. The hidden realm started to absorb everyone's spirit energy. However, Ning Yishu wasn't affected at all. He suddenly grabbed Chiu Bai's sword and punched him. In the sky of the hidden realm, the 6 moons turned into 6 giant eyes. Everyone in the hidden realm started to lose their spirit energy. Chiu Bai was shocked and terrified. He realized that he didn't have any strength left. He couldn't even resist. Ning Yishu's heart surged with rage. He risked his life and beat Chiu Bai to death. Soon, Chiu Bai was beaten beyond recognition. A normal youth beating a nascent soul cultivator. Wei Bai felt that this novel was too brainless. Suddenly, the bruised and swollen Chiu Bai reacted. He suddenly flew to Bai Weiwei's side and reached out to grab her neck. "Your master is in my hands, don't come over." Ning Yishu gasped for breath. He only felt a crazy power rushing through his body. The pain made him break out in a cold sweat. He saw Bai Weiwei weak and held hostage. Her black hair was disheveled, and her dress was stained with blood. Her face was pale, and the tips of her brows were covered in frost. It was like she would shatter. His mind went blank, and the image of her humiliating him flashed before his eyes. Instead, it was the appearance of her wide sleeves fluttering in the wind, her ink-black hair draped over her shoulders, and she looked like she was flying. Also, when she was killing monsters, her gait was slow and graceful, and her confidence was beautiful. Only be calm. It had nothing to do with the fact that she had a vicious heart and a snake on the inside. It was just a man's impression of a woman's beauty. Ding, the male lead's affection has increased to 8. The system was shocked. What's going on? How did the affection increase? Wei Bai was also stunned. It's probably because he found out that a trash like himself can also save a beauty, so he has a good impression of me. System, damn, so the male lead is such a superficial person. No, it should be said that the host is using all kinds of methods to praise her beauty. Ning Yishu suddenly raised his head and frowned. It was like he had seen something inconceivable. Transmigration system, male god, come here. /transmigration system, male god, come here. / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. The save button to record this reading. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 364. Chiu Bai, who had eaten brainless pills, also looked at it with him and saw a shocking scene. The moon turned into a huge eye, and the eyeball slowly rotated in the sky. This scene was so terrifying that it made one's hair stand on end. Who knew how many people in the secret realm had their spirit energy sucked away? The higher one's cultivation, the faster they would be affected. The moment Chiu Bai looked up, there was a cracking sound as his wrist was broken. Wei Bai saw Ning Yishu's figure move so quickly that it was terrifying. Chiu Bai, who was strangling her, was dragged away by Ning Yishu in the blink of an eye. Ning Yishu calmly took out the blood-stained dagger. Under Chiu Bai's unwilling gaze, he stabbed it into his body. The dagger drank blood and sucked it with all its might. Soon, the man who wanted to do something to Wei Bai died under his dagger. This was Ning Yishu's first time killing someone. But his heart was unmoved. Wei Bai lay on the ground and couldn't see what Ning Yishu was doing. What is he doing? The system said. He stabbed the dagger into brainless Bai's body and rotated it 360 degrees to widen the wound. Then, he took out the dagger and stabbed it in another place. Bai Weiwei, how much hatred, how much resentment, to torture people like this. The male lead is really perverted. The system reminded, he's coming. Wei Bai thought about that pitiful 8 favorability. This was going to be extremely difficult. She looked up and saw Ning Yishu slowly walking over, treading on the messy traces of a fight. The eerie light shone on his well-defined face. His eyes were red and there was a terrifying killing intent on his face. The dark energy that sucked in spirit energy couldn't do anything to him. Wei Wei Bai felt dizzy and couldn't even sit up. She could only look at him in a daze. Master. Ning Yishu bowed, his wooden expression long gone. His face was still expressionless, but with a few more traces of emotion, his entire face seemed to come alive. Wei Wei Bai thought about her response. Then she raised her eyebrows angrily. You know magic? He questioned coldly, as if he did not see the murderous intent in his eyes. Ning Yishu lowered his eyes, still holding the dagger in his hand. Kill her, this thought appeared so easily, but when it came to taking action, it was so hesitant. To maintain her stupid and vicious persona, Wei Wei Bai was crying in her heart, but on the surface, she continued to seek death. Why didn't you say that you could cultivate? You made me be laughed at for so many years. True enough. Ning Yishu mocked herself in her heart. A selfish person like her only had eyes for herself. Forget it. She suddenly sighed. Ning Yishu looked up in confusion. However, she struggled to get closer and said coldly, You can stay in Grand Heaven's Mountain and be my, Wei Wei Bai's, first disciple. If you can cultivate, I won't chase you away. The original owner took Ning Yishu in because he was a genius with a single spirit root. She wanted to nurture a good disciple. So this was not considered a violation of her persona. When Ning Yishu heard this, his fingers that were tightly holding the dagger loosened. In the next second, Wei Wei Bai's lips were already kissing him. Her body was weak to the point of being pitiful, and she urgently needed a large amount of pure yang energy. Ning Yishu once again gripped the dagger tightly. For this kind of woman who used him as a tool, what was he hesitating for, just as his murderous intent surged? Wei Wei Bai carelessly licked the roof of his mouth. He suddenly trembled, a wave of numbness spreading through his entire body. Ning Yishu's face immediately flushed red. The intense power in his body instantly calmed down. A simple kiss from her had left him in a sorry state. / Chapter 365. Bai Weiwei was also nervous, afraid that he would stab her, this old witch who ate young grass, to death. Fortunately, Ning Yishu was still traumatized from killing someone, so he spared her life. Because she was absorbing the energy from his body, she was not affected by the arcane realm, so she could barely stand up. Ning Yishu suddenly squatted down in silence. Master, I'll carry you. His voice was slightly hoarse. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while. This young man, did she turn him into a masochist so quickly? Or was this a trap? She had just begged for a piggyback, and now he was stabbing her. If she continued to hesitate, she would probably break her character. She had no choice but to break the boat and lay on his back. Ning Yishu immediately carried her. He was too nervous to notice that she was so light. She was so light that she was like a feather. When they passed by Qiu Bai's corpse, Wei Wei Bai suddenly said coldly, Go over. Ning Yishu walked over without hesitation. Give him a few good kicks. Oh right, step on his face while you're at it. Wei Wei Bai did not look at the corpse, afraid that she would have nightmares. But she had to take revenge for the face slapping. Ning Yishu was speechless. Thinking of something, Ning Yishu's face turned gloomy. Then, he kicked Qiu Bai a few times and stepped on his face. He had to make this corpse look even uglier. Wei Wei Bai said, Am I going to die so miserably in the future too? The system said, No. It's much worse than this. I have a drawing of the original owner before he died, do you want to see it? Wei Wei Bai said, Did he die very miserably? The system said, Very miserably. Wei Wei Bai said firmly, Miserably. Ning Yishu finished trampling on Qiu Bai and was about to leave. Wei Wei Bai added, take his natal magic weapon, brocade pouch and money pouch. Ning Yishu, cruel, vicious, and greedy. Did his master not have any good points? Ning Yishu accepted his fate and searched for Qiu Bai's things before placing them in his bag. The result of this trip to the secret realm was for the male lead to plunder the belongings of many dead people. Therefore, whenever Wei Wei Bai saw a dead person along the way, she would ask him to search their money bags. Ning Yishu was expressionless. He was crazy about money. He wouldn't even let go of a dead person. After collecting most of her belongings, Wei Wei Bai asked the system to bring up the map of the secret territory. She planned to use the male lead's aura to walk out of the secret territory. She asked casually, do you know how to get out of here? If he said that he didn't know, she would be able to act cool. Ning Yishu respectfully replied, I know, master. I've seen the map of this place. After saying this, he fell into a suspicious silence before calmly saying, there's something wrong with this secret territory. I will carry master out. This wasn't nonsense. Anyone could see that something was wrong with those 6 shining eyes in the sky. Wei Wei Bai nodded. Then walk faster. I'm tired. Her wounds were only temporarily sealed. Although she had used painkillers, the tiredness wouldn't go away. Ning Yishu lowered his eyes, his gloomy expression unchanged. Yes, master. Then, Wei Wei Bai discovered that Ning Yishu's route wasn't right. She flipped through the map. This route was the Labyrinth of Illusions. In the Labyrinth of Illusions, there was a beast that specifically guarded the blushed flower. The secret territory was a trap, but the treasures inside were real. Ning Yishu actually didn't care about the strangeness of the secret territory. Relying on the fact that he wasn't affected, he actually wanted to pick the blushed flower. Chapter 366. With such a strong heart, it was no wonder he could become a god. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. Slagstem, Ning Yishu isn't planning to feed me to the guardian beast, is he? The system said, I looked through the data, the guardian beast loves the flesh of living women the most. No wonder Ning Yishu did not stab her to death. He wanted to feed her to the beast. Wei Wei Bai's brain worked hard. If this continued, she would have to say goodbye. It was too difficult for Ning Yishu to have a good impression of a vicious woman. The previous 8 points of favorability were probably due to her being the most beautiful woman in the world. After all, people liked beautiful things. No matter how vicious a flower was, some people would have a good impression of it. This was their instinct. However, this kind of favorability was too shallow. Not breaking the character setting, Wei Wei Bai searched through the original owner's past, then suddenly she knocked on the system. Well, villains have a past too, right? The system said, yes. Then what was the original owner's past? She flipped through the novel but could not find it. Her memory was also a blur. The system said, the author is lazy, there is no setting. No wonder her memory was blurry. Wei Wei Bai said, then can I fill it in? The system said, 5 days of life. Wei Wei Bai, the system said, and you fill in the setting, you still have to make Ning Yishu think you're vicious. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. Can I make him feel pity for me? The system said, yes, but you can't break your vicious personality. Wei Wei Bai thought, how obsessed are you with being vicious and vicious? Ning Yishu walked towards the labyrinth of illusion step by step. He knew that there was a mythical beast guarding the flower. And that mythical beast loved women's flesh the most. The power he had just unleashed made him even more convinced that his spirit route was blocked. That was because the power was intermittent. If it wasn't blocked, how could it be like this? He couldn't beat the guardian beast alone. And Wei Wei Bai was undoubtedly the perfect bait. Thinking of this, he felt a little depressed. Ning Yishu suppressed that feeling. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. Besides, a woman like Wei Wei Bai should have died long ago. Ning Yishu's nature was to endure silently, have a cold heart, and take revenge for any enmity. Seeing the appearance of the labyrinth of illusions, Ning Yishu's footsteps paused. His expression was gloomy as he struggled for a moment before finally stepping in. As he walked, he comforted her with a gentle voice, "Master, we will be able to get out of here very soon. Martial Uncle is dead, so Grand Heaven Mountain will be your world in the future." Wei Wei Bai weakly sneered, "Don't call that bitch Martial Uncle. Once we get out, there's no need to punish me with a whip. Just help me heal my damaged meridians." Ning Yishu was very gentle. "Okay, it's this disciple's honor to be able to serve Master." But his expression was terrifyingly cold. She clearly knew that too little spiritual energy could destroy a person's spirit root, but Wei Wei Bai still used him without any psychological burden. After entering the labyrinth, he pretended to walk around a few times. "We seem to be lost, Master." Wei Wei Bai didn't answer. She was so weak that she fainted. Ning Yishu said very cautiously, "Master, wait here. I'll go find a way out." After waiting for a while, he was sure that she had really fainted. Only then did he slowly put her down and let her lean against a rock, directly facing the entrance of the guardian beast. She was covered in blood, her clothes were torn, and some of the ornaments on her hair were all missing. She was really in a sorry state. Ning Yishu looked at her with a gloomy gaze. His gaze swept past the faintly discernible trace of whiteness under the torn clothes. His breathing became a lot heavier, and he immediately looked away. Then he took off his coat and covered her body with it. If she wasn't so vicious, he wouldn't have to kill her. Ning Yishu hesitantly left, step by step a bit heavy. Suddenly, the terrifying sound of a beast sounded behind him. He hesitated for a moment, then fiercely clenched his fists. His eyes hardened, and he quickly left, leaving Wei Wei Bai as the guardian beasts meet. Slash. Chapter 367. After he left, Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes. She had just haggled with the system and spent another day of her life points. She had directly activated the Labyrinth of Illusions trap. Then she would use the entire labyrinth to create a huge illusion, and use the illusions in the illusion to fill up Wei Wei Bai's past. The name of the illusion was, "Shocking, your master's tragic past is unknown to all. If you don't see it, you won't be a hero." System. The headlines of this rural fringe area are getting lower and lower. Ning Yishu resisted the urge to turn around and ran a little further away. He planned to sneak in and pick the blessed flower after the guardian beast was lured out. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks. The surroundings were terrifyingly silent. Darkness spread out. He looked up and saw that the 6 eyes had disappeared. The sky had also disappeared. Ning Yishu immediately thought of the terrifying aspect of the Labyrinth of Illusions. This labyrinth would stimulate one's inner obsessions and then weave them into illusions, causing people to wander around. Regardless of whether it was something unbearable, something one longed for, or a happy experience, it could all be used as nourishment for illusions. He actually triggered the labyrinth's trap. Ning Yishu did not hesitate to use the dagger to cut the back of his hand. The blood was immediately absorbed by the dagger. The dagger emitted a faint red light, ominous and sinister. This dagger that he had accidentally obtained had the ability to break through illusions. The illusions suddenly disappeared, and a small flower with a purple and red circle appeared in front of him. Ning Yishu's pupils shrank. The blessed flower. He immediately reached out to pick it. Suddenly, the back of his hand was fiercely slapped, causing him to tremble. "You thief, why are you picking my flower?" A tender and clear child's voice rang out. Ning Yishu looked up in shock, but found that there was no sign of the blessed flower in front of him. Instead, there were some ordinary flowers. The girl standing in front of him was about 7 or 8 years old. She wore a green shirt and had her hair combed into 2 buns. She looked exquisite and cute. Her face had not fully matured yet, but one could see her beautiful appearance in the future. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that her face was very similar. "You're home." Ning Yishu raised his head in confusion. In the end, he saw that the surroundings were actually pavilions and buildings of the human world. The girl said fiercely, "You stole my flowers. You're a thief. I'm going to throw you into the pond." Ning Yishu. "Damn brat, I thought she was cute, but she's actually so vicious. This character. This appearance. Why did it feel so familiar?" Before Ning Yishu could think further, the girl suddenly ran out. "Catch the thief, catch the thief." Ning Yishu hurriedly followed him. "I'm not a thief. You're mistaken." The girl ran to the front of the main house and suddenly stopped. As for Ning Yishu, who had followed after him, his footsteps also stiffened. Blood flowed out of the door, and there were mountains of corpses inside. "It's this family. There's a child with a single water spirit root. Kill this family and take the child away. It can be considered as cutting off her mortal ties." Inside the door, someone said coldly. But the girls suddenly screamed, "Father, Mother." Ning Yishu already knew what had happened. When he was cultivating, he had heard that some sects would kill the child's family to fight over a talented child. That way, the child would have no one to rely on and could only rely on the cultivation sections. What a cruel and terrifying method. Ning Yishu hurriedly said, "Don't go in." But it was too late. A hand lifted the girl's collar. "Found it. It's this child. Go back." The girl screamed, "Let go of me. Who are you? Let go of me." Ning Yishu didn't know where the impulse came from, but he actually rushed over. Let go of her. In the end, his fingers pierced through those people's bodies. Ning Yishu looked at his hand strangely. Slash. Comma. She suddenly held his hand and pressed it into the spirit spring. The wound healed. Slash. Chapter 369. She proudly looked up and her smile became sly. "All right, you're injured, so I'll heal you. We don't owe each other anything." Was this considered repaying a debt? What a sly little fox. Ning Yishu couldn't help but laugh. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 10. After he finished laughing, the scene changed again. It turned into a firewood shed. He knew this place. He was once punished by being locked up here for 10 days without eating. Because he couldn't cultivate, he didn't eat and almost starved to death. He was a bit anxious. He looked around and saw a familiar person curled up in the corner of the firewood shed. She didn't feel safe and hugged her knees, burying her head in them and shivering from the cold. He gently walked over and reached out to touch her, only to find that she had already fainted and was running a high fever. Ning Yishu hesitated a bit before picking her up again. No one could see him in this illusion. The empty grand heavens mountain. The silent buildings of a ghost town. He was also panicked by being alone, but when he held her in his arms, he found that it wasn't that bad. Not to mention, her experience was too similar to his. Whipped, locked up, all alone. When Ning Yishu saw her, it was as if he saw himself. He carried her back to his little broken house and took out some common medicine used in the human world. He bandaged the wounds on her body that hadn't healed yet. Then he used cold water to cool her down. She suddenly opened her eyes. Who is it? She was like an injured cub, ready to jump up and bite at any moment. Ning Yishu softly said, "It's me." She finally saw him clearly and the vigilance on her face relaxed. "Oh, it's you." Ning Yishu saw her pale little face and couldn't help saying, "Are you feeling better?" She nodded and suddenly frowned. "Why did you save me?" Ning Yishu was stunned. Actually, he didn't know why he saved her. Clearly, his heart had long been hardened by the coldness of reality. But when he saw her, his heart couldn't help softening. Maybe it's because you're very similar to me. People who were injured would always want to hug another injured person to keep warm. When she heard this, she became unhappy. "You're so old, how can you look like me? Besides, I'm much prettier than you." After saying that, she looked at his handsome face with jealousy and then turned her face away in a fit of pique. She was still a little girl. Ning Yishu was not angry, he just thought it was funny, and the way she shrunk into a ball was also very cute. He reached out and gently patted her head. "Yes, you're the most beautiful." She turned her back to him and snorted coldly, as if she disdained his compliment. But he saw the side of her face blushing. She was shy. He was just a child. Ning Yishu's heart softened and he couldn't help but smile. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 12. This is a tortoise-like speed increase. Suddenly, she heard Ning Yishu say, "I know you're not reconciled and want to take revenge, but you're too weak, so you need to disguise yourself when necessary." Her ears twitched and she turned around, fiercely saying, "I knew you were sent by them. Don't think that I'll forget my parents. I won't cultivate, so I won't let you succeed." Ning Yishu didn't know whether to laugh or cry, he didn't think that she would think this way. But when he thought about how she saw her family die tragically and suffered so much torture, he also knew where her vigilance came from. He couldn't help but want to teach her. You can't take revenge like this, you don't have the strength, so you need to cultivate. Wait until you're stronger than anyone else, then you can do what you want. Transmigration system, male god, come here. /transmigration system, male god, come here / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 370. She frowned as if she didn't quite understand and thought for a moment. Is it okay to become stronger? Ning Yishu nodded and couldn't help but soften his voice. That's right. If you become stronger, no one can bully you. This was the truth that he had learned since he was a child. In this world, the strong preyed on the weak. If you don't want to be beaten, you can only be the one to beat others. She suddenly waved her hand. Hey, come here. Ning Yishu leaned over and gave her a light kiss on the lips. He was startled and reached out to touch his mouth. She frowned and coldly snorted, "You're lucky. This is my first kiss. Consider it as a gift for saving me. I won't owe you anything in the future." After saying this, she turned around and couldn't help but complain to herself, "This is really lucky for you. You're so old and you're so average looking. No woman will like you." Ning Yishu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This could also be considered a gift in return. Moreover, she was still a child. What was in her head all day? But his heart softened. That faint sweetness was like drinking honey. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 15. After Ning Yishu finished laughing, he found that the scene had changed. The sound of a bell rang, and a snow-white, delicate foot suddenly appeared under his chin, lifting his face. Ning Yishu's first sight was the anklet on her ankle. The small green bell on the anklet contrasted with her snow-white skin. Then there was her already grown face. Her eyes were like water and her eyebrows were flirtatious. She raised her eyebrows and said in a sweet voice, "Idiot, where did you run off to? I couldn't find you." She sat on the railing, her black hair flying and her long skirt floating. Ning Yishu stared blankly at her young and delicate face, but it was incomparably familiar. His heart skipped a few beats as a bitter and astringent feeling surged up. She looked to be 13 or 14 years old. Her youth was just right, so beautiful that it was full of vitality. Seeing him in a daze, she couldn't help but pout. She coldly snorted and said, "Seeing that you still look like an ordinary person, you must be very weak. I'm already at the foundation establishment stage." Ning Yishu didn't dare to look at her. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "You're cultivating very quickly." When she heard this, she pursed her red lips and smiled. "Of course, I am the person who has cultivated the fastest in the past 1,000 years in Grand Heaven's Mountain." Ning Yishu really wanted to run away. He already knew whose illusionary realm he was in. He was extremely clear-headed, so the illusion could not use him. He could only use someone else to create an illusion, and that person who was trapped in the illusion and kept wandering around. "Hey!" A delicate and dissatisfied voice rang out. Just as Ning Yishu raised his head, she flicked his forehead with her finger. "Is he really stupid?" Ning Yishu looked up at her, his eyes flashing with complicated emotions. She suddenly lifted her foot. "Help me put on my shoes, dummy." She still had that arrogant and willful appearance. She had never been kind since she was young. Ning Yishu knew whose past this was. He knew that he would definitely be able to walk out of this illusion. Because this was not his illusion, and the only person that could be trapped in the labyrinth of illusions was her. Ning Yishu took 2 steps back and looked at her deeply. As long as he took a few more steps back and used his dagger to break out of the illusion, he would be able to leave. In reality, he still had to pick the blushed flower. He shouldn't waste time playing with her here. She suddenly lifted her foot, and the crisp sound of the bell made her tilt her head in confusion. "Are you stupid, or do you not even know how to put on your shoes?" Even in her own illusion, she liked to bully others so much. Ning Yishu was angry. Chapter 371. She was shocked and forgot that she was a foundation establishment cultivator. She was pulled down from the railing by him and fell into his arms. In reality, he wouldn't dare to treat her like this. Because this was an illusion, his strength was actually greater than hers. She was also shocked. "Aren't you an ordinary person?" Ning Yishu knew why he could hold her hostage. It was because her body in reality was extremely weak and her mind was entangled in the illusion. And he was awake, so in the illusion, he was the stronger one. Ning Yishu didn't answer. He put her on the ground, then bent down and put on a pair of embroidered shoes for her. She laughed softly. She seemed to be very proud of him for being obedient. This woman, why didn't she change? Selfish and thick-skinned. Shouldn't women be more reserved? She let a man wash her feet and put on her shoes every day. Did she not have any sense of shame? Ning Yishu thought angrily. After putting on the shoes, she suddenly turned around and laid on his back. "Hey, carry me. I'm tired." Ning Yishu. She's asking for a yard after giving him an inch. He thought that she was also like this in reality. She would mock and ridicule people for no reason and would ask for someone to carry her. Why was she so delicate? Suddenly, she reached out and pulled his ear. "You're deaf." Carry me. She was only in her teens, but she was so casually seducing people. Ning Yishu's ears turned red. He immediately carried her and walked forward. A fragrant wind blew. Her body was filled with a fragrance. It was rich and smelled especially good. Hey, what's your name? He pursed his lips and was silent for a while before answering, Ning. She teased, it sounds like a girl's name. My name is Wei Wei Bai. Do you remember it? He looked at her face and knew that she was Wei Wei Bai. Besides being a little younger, they were exactly the same. Even their infuriating personalities were the same. Wei Wei Bai blew a breath into his ear, you have to remember my name. I will become the strongest cultivator in the future and do whatever I want. Ning Yishu's ears turned even redder as he hurriedly changed the topic. You're not taking revenge anymore. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while before she sneered, revenge is a must. I have to skin them, cut off their flesh, hang them up, and whip their corpses to relieve the hatred in my heart. Ning Yishu sighed. No matter how he looked at her, he didn't like her at all. Oh, that's right. You look especially weak. When I reach the nascent soul stage in the future and control the Grand Heavens mountain range, I will take you in as my disciple. Ning Yishu stopped in his tracks and smiled bitterly. She had indeed accepted him as her disciple. Unfortunately, she didn't seem to like this disciple of his. Wei Wei Bai lowered her status and said, I'll give you the position of head disciple. You should thank me. Ning Yishu thought to himself, being your disciple is really my bad luck of 8 lifetimes. He thought of the days when he was abused by her, whipped, locked up, starved, and even mocked and ridiculed. She seemed to have experienced all of this before. When she was weaving illusions, she would use the deepest obsessions in her heart as nourishment. Thus, when her family was exterminated when she was young and she was beaten and abused, it was her deepest memory. Thinking of this, Ning Yishu's heart ached for some reason. The loathing in his heart unknowingly decreased a bit. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. She jumped down from his body and pushed him into the door at the side, closing the door behind him. Don't come out. Ning Yishu stood inside the door and looked outside through the crack of the door. Wei Wei Bai respectfully lowered her head. Master. A man whose face couldn't be seen clearly said coldly, what level of water spirit scripture have you cultivated to? Chiu Bai, Ning Yishu frowned and walked past those faceless people. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. All the dim colors were glowing with vitality. She walked over from the end of the corridor. She was wearing a light blue chiffon dress. Her skin was like cream, and her long hair hung down to her waist. With every step she took, he heard the tinkling of bells. Slash. Chapter 373. This was the adult Wei Wei Bai. She suddenly quickened her steps and arrived in front of him. Ning, where did you go? Long time no see. Her fragrance wafted into his nose. Ning Yishu smelled the familiar fragrance and saw her familiar face. It completely overlapped with the real her. But the real her wouldn't have such a friendly attitude. Wei Wei Bai suddenly raised her brows. I said you were a normal person, but after so many years, you still don't look old. Ning Yishu's heart skipped a beat. Was she starting to suspect something? Once she started to suspect something was wrong, the illusion would be shaken. Then, they would be able to break out of the illusion. No, he should have left long ago. This illusion wasn't his, so in theory, it couldn't trap him. But he still couldn't leave. Why do you look so bitter? Do you feel bad when you see me? Bai Weiwei poked his forehead with a finger and said unhappily. If she was unhappy, no one else would be happy. Suddenly, a male voice interrupted. Junior sister, why aren't you agreeing to my proposal? Weiwei Bai's face darkened and a trace of disgust flashed in her eyes. She stood in front of Ning Yishu, carelessly brushing back her hair. I practice the water spirit scripture, so I need to protect my primordial yin. In this life, it's impossible for me to dual cultivate with someone. Qiu Bai was wearing a white robe and looked handsome and gentle. Junior sister, how can you say that? We can just communicate mentally and not physically. Spiritual intercourse was a deeper form of union than physical union. Weiwei Bai scoffed. No need, I don't want to marry you. Qiu Bai's face sank. Oh, junior sister, are you looking down on me? Weiwei Bai was annoyed. No, I think you're ugly. After speaking, she turned around and pulled Ning Yishu forward. Ning Yishu turned around and saw Qiu Bai's vicious face. If it were him, he would not make enemies for himself so directly unless he could kill the enemy in one hit. She was too vicious, but not smart enough. Suddenly, Weiwei Bai turned around. No one can see you. Ning Yishu's heart tightened. Was she finally beginning to suspect something? In the end, a hint of sadness suddenly appeared on her face. Am I too lonely? Is that why I imagined someone to accompany me? Ning Yishu took a step forward. He couldn't help but want to get closer to her. He wanted to tell her that he was real. But he couldn't bring himself to say it. Because they were all fake. She fell into the illusion of her past memories and couldn't get out. And he was also trapped here. Weiwei Bai did not want his answer. Forget it. Anyway, when I am strong enough, you will disappear. The strongest won't be lonely. After speaking, she shook off his hand and left. Ning Yishu's fingers were empty and his heart was also empty. He saw her clothes flutter as she turned around without hesitation. He didn't know where this impulse came from. He suddenly rushed over. Reaching out, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his embrace with too much force. Her hair fluttered and there was a trace of shock on her face. Ning Yishu opened his arms and hugged her tightly. He could feel the softness and fragrance in his hands. No, I really exist. He didn't know why he emphasized this. Weiwei Bai froze and let him hug her. Ning Yishu didn't know where he got the courage, but he suddenly lowered his head and gently kissed her lips. The doubts and surging impulses in his heart broke through the walls of his rationality and poured out into passion. He finally knew why he couldn't get out. She was trapped by her past. And he was trapped by her. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 30. Transmigration system, male god, come here, /transmigration system. Male god, come here, /transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here, /. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 374. You can search, Transmigration system, male god, you can come to Sashu. Come on Baidu to find the S. Weiwei Bai's body stiffened. She suddenly pushed him away and turned around to run. Halfway through, she felt that her reaction was too cowardly. She immediately turned around and formed a water sleeve with her hand, sending Ning Yishu flying. Ning Yishu didn't feel any pain, but he was still sent flying to the ground. Weiwei Bai angrily said, "Next time you dare to do this to me, I'll kill you." Her words were hurried and fierce, but her face turned red. It didn't seem like she was angry, but rather shy. After she finished cursing, she turned around and flew out, disappearing in front of him. Ning Yishu lay on the ground. In the past, whenever he was whipped by Weiwei Bai, he would remember it in his heart. Then he would think about how to get back at her in the future. But now, all the hatred in his heart had vanished into thin air. Thinking of her angry and shy appearance, Ning Yishu couldn't help but laugh in a low voice. So his master also had such a cute side to her. So cute that his heart was about to melt. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 35. Suddenly, the surroundings darkened. Ning Yishu knit his brows. The scene in this illusion kept changing. Wei Wei Bai had also grown up. Were these the memories that left the deepest impression on her? Then, he heard a sinister laugh. "Gigi, my disciple, come to your master's side." When Ning Yishu heard these malicious words, he felt a layer of goosebumps appear on his skin. Wei Wei Bai's weak voice sounded. "What kind of array is this, master?" That faceless master appeared again. This time it could be seen that he was already old. "My time is almost up. I thought that I wouldn't be able to hold on, but I met you. My good disciple, your water spirit scripture has already reached the 10th layer and your body has completely matured." Ning Yishu finally saw a giant array appear under Wei Wei Bai's body. The formation was complex and unknown, and a white mist-like light flowed around it. She lay powerlessly on the array, her forehead covered in cold sweat. Her master walked to her side, stretched out his wrinkled hand, and gently stroked her hair. When Ning Yishu saw this, he couldn't help but become angry. He wanted to rush over, but found that he couldn't move, and couldn't even make a sound. "I've waited for too long. Although you're a woman, I can't find a more suitable body for me." Fear flashed across Wei Wei Bai's face. "You want to possess my body?" His master grinned. "That's right, my good disciple. Give me your body." Wei Wei Bai's face was covered in cold sweat. Her body trembled, and she was in so much pain that she began to convulse. Perhaps it was her despair that made her too lazy to pretend. She looked up, and the resentment in her eyes surged out. "Old fart, I would rather self-destruct than give you my body." His master sneered, "Do you think you can self-destruct? I've been waiting for this day for so long, how could I let you self-destruct? How could I not know about the hatred in your heart? Why do you think I've always allowed you to grow? I only want your body, not your brain." Wei Wei Bai desperately tried to mobilize her spiritual energy, but in the end, her body was empty. The huge formation emitted a white halo, suppressing all of her struggles. That faceless master approached her step by step. He held a strange magic tool in his hand, and kept absorbing the surrounding spiritual energy. Her master laughed out loud. "My good disciple, give me your body." After saying that, he threw the magic tool in his hand above her head. A cold light rushed out from the magic tool, enveloping Wei Wei Bai below. TXT. Chapter 376. You can search Transmigration System, Male God, you can come to Sashu. Come on Baidu to find the. How could 5 days of life be that easy to earn? The host was making up her own desolate past, so it had to be responsible for uploading this nonsense to the host and creating this giant illusion. System, motherfucker, it feels like its host is even better at fabricating nonsense than a novel writer. What kind of nonsense is this? Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 40. The system was shocked. Was the male lead feeling pleasure from being whipped? How could his favorability increase like this? Ning Yishu was being whipped by her, but there was no resentment in his eyes. He waited for her to vent her anger before suddenly reaching out to grab her sleeve. In the illusion, he was stronger than her. So with a tug, he pulled her into his embrace. Wei Wei Bai fell into his embrace, but before she could look up, he had already reached out to hold her. His hand pressed down on her head, burying her in his shoulder like he was comforting a child. Don't be afraid, Wei Wei. This was the first time he called her name, but also the first time he wanted to forget that they were master and disciple. He ignored her desperate struggle and reached out to pat her back. Don't be afraid, I'm here. Only people who had experienced despair would know this kind of pain. The more intense her reaction was, the more it proved that she was afraid. Ning Yishu was not willing to let go of her, so she couldn't hit him. She could only use her nails to scratch at his arm until it bled. She bitterly said, "Let go of me, let go of me." Ning Yishu felt the pain, but he was not willing to let go. He was still trying to comfort her, trying to calm her down. Wei Wei Bai's fingers fiercely pinched, digging out more blood from the broken skin on his arm. Truly, a cruel woman. Ning Yishu gave a bitter smile, but he could only accept his fate and help her vent her anger. She suddenly stopped struggling and the strength that was pinching his arm also disappeared. Ning Yishu's hand that was patting her back also stopped. He felt a moist sensation on his shoulder and the side of his neck. She was crying. Wei Wei Bai silently rested her head on his shoulder. She didn't make a sound as she gritted her teeth and tried her best not to cry. Those tears kept falling onto his skin, as if they could smash a person's heart into pieces. Ning Yishu had a bunch of words stuck in his throat. He forced himself to speak a few times before softly saying, in the future, no one will bully you anymore. You have taken your revenge. In the entire Grand Heavens Mountain, only you are the most powerful. Bai Weiwei didn't say anything. In the future, you can hit and bully whoever you want. You can kick away whoever you don't like. He didn't care about anything else. He just wanted her to stop crying. Those words that he would never have said before, now came out one sentence after another. As long as she was happy, murder and arson did not matter. Ning Yishu racked his brains, coaxing her word by word. After an unknown amount of time, she finally felt tired and stopped her stifled cries. Ning Yishu heaved a sigh of relief. She suddenly said in a dissatisfied tone, "Why didn't you appear earlier?" Ning Yishu quickly said, "I'll definitely come earlier to save you next time." Wei Wei Bai kicked him away and said in a delicate voice, "Who wants you to save me? Who do you think you are?" Ning Yishu helplessly looked at her. She really had a spoiled personality. He thought back to when he first entered the dreamscape. At such a young age, she already knew how to throw people she didn't like into the water and drown them. Sure enough, her personality was naturally not likable. Wei Wei Bai suddenly turned her face away and raised her foot. She awkwardly said, "I dropped my shoes." Ning Yishu saw her shoes and hurriedly went to pick them up and put them on for her. Chapter 377. After dressing up, she immediately stood up and walked out. Ning Yishu immediately followed. Wei Wei Bai opened the door and the bright morning light poured in, dispelling all of the darkness. She stood in the morning light and looked back with a smile. "It was indescribably beautiful, idiot, you have to come find me earlier next time." Ning Yishu's heart sped up and he couldn't help but smile. Ding, the male lead's affection has increased to 45. Suddenly, the scene in front of him disappeared. Ning Yishu saw himself standing beside the spirit spring. This was the place he had brought her to heal. When he saw the person in the spring, his pupils couldn't help shrinking. Wei Wei Bai was lying at the edge of the spring. Her bare back and snow-white skin were covered in crisscrossing scars. How did this happen? After killing her master, wasn't there no one who could bully her? Could it be Chiu Bai? She suddenly opened her eyes and cautiously said, "Who is it?" After saying this, she finally saw the person in front of her. "It's you." She let out a sigh of relief. Ning Yishu looked at the scars on her body and his eyes were cold. Who did this? Wei Wei Bai casually looked at him and then suddenly smiled. Who dares to hurt me? I am at the nascent soul stage right now. Grand Heaven's Mountain only has 2 nascent soul stage cultivators. Even that ugly senior brother of mine doesn't dare to bully me. Ning Yishu lowered his eyes and reached out to touch her back. He could feel the scars on her back. Although they had started to fade after soaking in the spirit spring, he could still see how terrifying and painful it was when she was injured. Wei Wei Bai said without care, "These are the scars from the lightning tribulation when I was breaking into the nascent soul stage. Compared to forming a nascent soul and passing the lightning tribulation, these scars are nothing." She was good at calculating benefits and valued gains and losses. So when she successfully passed the lightning tribulation, she was so happy that she didn't care about her scars. Ning Yishu felt a bitter taste in his mouth. You broke through to the nascent soul stage. He didn't know how many years it would take him to change the setting. And she was getting closer and closer to the age of reality. He didn't know that in a few years she would accept him as her disciple. Ning Yishu suddenly caught a whiff of a familiar fragrance as the woman approached him. He looked up in shock and saw her looking up. Her bright eyes were calculating, and her lips were almost touching the corner of his mouth. I say, Ning, where did you come from? Bai Weiwei's lips curled into a smile. Her face was flushed, sweet and beautiful. All these years, you've been by my side like a ghost, but I couldn't see through your cultivation. Ning Yishu felt bitter in his heart. He told the truth. I'm just an ordinary person. A piece of trash with a single spirit root who could not cultivate. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows a little angrily. We're old friends, yet you still dare to lie to me. How can an ordinary person not age after so many years? Because this was an illusory realm. Ning Yishu clearly knew that this illusory realm would absorb people's spirit chi, but he still stayed here. The labyrinth of illusions was not a difficult trap to solve. As long as someone admitted it and realized that this was a fake world, they could break it. But he was unwilling to break it. Because he knew that once he broke it, he and her, one would still be the high and mighty Grand Heaven's Mountain's martial granduncle, while the other would be an ant at her feet. Reality was so cruel, which made this illusory realm even more attractive and beautiful. He always knew how to make a choice, and his heart had always been tenacious. But for this fake sweetness, he let himself fall into danger. Slash. Chapter 378. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were smiling as she softly said, Yo, I'm already at the nascent soul stage, yet I can't see through your cultivation. You're at least at the demigod stage, right? Since you're so powerful, why don't you become my Tao companion? Ning Yishu's heart suddenly started beating rapidly. Become Tao companions, his breathing was rapid, and his face was slightly red. But in the midst of his excitement, he saw a clear calculation in her eyes. She didn't deliberately pretend to be gentle because she liked him, but because she felt that he was a powerful immortal cultivator, so she planned to use him. What do you want? He asked softly. Wei Wei Bai's gentle smile disappeared, and she raised her eyebrows and sneered, I want to kill my senior brother and monopolize Grand Heaven's Mountain. As expected, this vicious character of hers didn't change at all. And she actually said that she wanted to use him so openly. She was simply stupid, yet cute. Ning Yishu felt that he couldn't be saved. Even after being tricked by her, he still thought that she was cute. Seeing him in a daze, Wei Wei Bai impatiently flicked his forehead. Are you stupid? If you don't want to help me, then forget it. I'll find another man. This sentence directly triggered the floodgates of a man's anger. He fiercely grabbed her hand and pulled her into his embrace. She wasn't wearing any clothes, and the wounds on her body had faded a lot. Her delicate and beautiful skin could still be seen. Ning Yishu was originally going to be angry, but he found that another flame in his heart was burning even more fiercely. Is it true that whoever is more powerful can be your guest? Wei Wei Bai's eyes turned, and she was unrepentant. That's right, the strong is the king. The man I want must be the strongest and the best. Ning Yishu's heart was incomparably cold. What if he's not strong enough? Wei Wei Bai was incomparably calm. Throw him away. A man who isn't strong isn't a man in my eyes. Ning Yishu sneered. As expected, this kind of woman. What exactly did he see in her? He was not stupid, and his heart was not blind. Those feelings of pity, jealousy, and longing intertwined together to form a damned love. He suppressed his anger and closed his eyes. Suddenly, he felt her fingers gently glide across his jaw. This action was extremely provocative. Ning Yishu finally lost control of the crazy emotions that he had been suppressing. He opened his eyes coldly. Are you so willing to ruin yourself? Wei Wei Bai saw that he was being sarcastic. She couldn't stand being bullied, so she flung his hand away. Who wants to coax you? If it weren't for the fact that you're stronger than me, I wouldn't be happy to see you. These words actually sounded a little like a girl's grievance. It didn't seem like he was scolding, but more like he was complaining. However, Ning Yishu was struck by her words. Her disdainful attitude completely overlapped with reality. It was like a knife, cutting his rationality into pieces. Was he stronger than her? She couldn't afford to lose her primordial yin because of the cultivation technique she practiced. So even if she became Tao companions with someone, she could only achieve her goal through spiritual intercourse. Ning Yishu suddenly jumped into the spirit spring. His eyes were red, and he pressed her against the side of the spirit spring. Wei Wei Bai thought he was joking. Let go of me. So what if you're strong? In the illusion, even if she was a nascent soul, she couldn't escape his control. Because he was awake, compared to her in the illusion, his spiritual power was much stronger. Ning Yishu suddenly lowered his head and kissed her back. The wet tip of his tongue licked her skin, as if he was licking the most beautiful dessert in the world. Slash.